Greetings and welcome to the Saco City Council meeting for Monday, February 22nd, 2021. I'd like to call the meeting to order at 6:31 p.m. Let the record reflect that all councilors are present, including City Administrator Brian Canrath. At this moment in time, I'd like to invite everyone to join us in the Pledge of Allegiance under item 3 of tonight's agenda. The flag is behind City Administrator Canrath. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. And there's nothing under general tonight. Item 5, committee correspondence to council. Are there any committee correspondence at this time? No committee. Councilor Minthorn?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just want to let everyone know that the Board of Directors of Shuttle Bus Zoom, or Transit BSOOB as it's now referred to, is moving forward with our process for the executive search for the new executive director of transit. And there have been weekly meetings and bi-weekly meetings moving forward to facilitate to that end.
Thank you, Councilor Minthorn. Any further committee correspondence? Moving on to item 6, which is public comment. City Administrator Canrath, have we received any public comment for tonight's meeting?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I have one written statement I'll read into the record now.
Thank you.
This comes to us from Kelly Archer, 185 Bradley Street, Saco. Dear Mayor, council members, and City Administrator, I am Kelly Archer, living at 185 Bradley Street. I not only love Saco, but I am in love with the city of Saco. I am in full support of Save Saco Neighborhoods. Unofficial spokesperson Phil Hatch's comments presented to you for your consideration and deliberations. As I've repeatedly shared with you and the planning board for several months, due process is not being followed by staff and/or council recommendations. It began last spring with the unilateral staff-driven and/or written items in the R5MU I2 PR and master plan developments. The planning board and council has not received full disclosure, or as I say, both sides of the coin, for your due diligence in making your informed decisions for the city of Saco. It is unfair to all of us concerned. I am disheartened at the lack of no master plan development training prior to the city's first master plan application, and I urge you to consider a moratorium of master plan developments or a growth management ordinance to slow all of this down. Please answer our questions. We want to learn, be educated, and understand. We need to heal, collaborate, and respond to each other respectfully as we're all in this together. Thank you for your deep and reflective consideration to all that has been voiced by so many people for so many months. Blessings to all of us as we endure these growing pains. Thank you, Kelly Archer, 185 Bradley Street. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, City Administrator Canrath. If there's members of the public who would like to speak to the City Council, please use the raise hand feature of the Zoom platform or *9 if using a phone, and you'll be unmuted to speak to the council. Again, I remind everyone to state their name and address for the record. Keep to the 3-minute time limit. First up is Bruce Reed. Bruce, you've been allowed to speak. Please state your name and address for the record and present your 3 minutes of comments to council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. Can you all see me? And can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. Well, I don't need to be seen necessarily. I just wonder, I don't see a video screen. I realize that this is a 3-minute public comment period. As you know, I represent the John Flatley Company. And you know the development that they're involved with. Councilor Archer's mother just had a letter read into the record on this particular project. Were the councilors able to read the submission letter that I put in your packets? Good, I see people nodding their heads. I'm glad to hear that. I've been representing the John Flatley Company for a while now. They didn't need an attorney, or didn't engage me until Mr. Bannon came on behalf of the neighbors. And Mr. Bannon and I have been around the horn numerous times over the last 30 some years. I'm speaking at this public comment time because it looks very much like with the number of people that are lined up to speak, that it may become a public hearing, which we would like to participate in, but you're obviously not advertised for that. And in my letter, I told you, we have experts prepared to address the zoning amendment issues. These are basic issues that the council should hear before making any decisions on an amendment or a zoning change. You should be able to hear from, this is a targeted zoning amendment. Let's not play games here. This isn't about changing a zoning district in Saco. It's about us. It's about the John Flatley Company and our development. We're very well aware of it. We're very well aware that we're sitting in front of a planning board that voted 7-0 to change the zoning on us midstream. So it's been very frustrating. And I know my time is limited here, but I want to make sure that you hear from us. We want a fair shake here. What kind of a message does this send to any developer coming into Saco for any reason? Come on in, play by the rules, meet with our planning staff, get opinions from your city council, EL on that, Jim Katsiafikas, get opinions, but ignore them all and change the rules midstream. That's kind of the way we feel we're being treated right now. All we want is a fair shake. And we're prepared, you can see in my packet, we're prepared to show you what the MDR looks like as compared to what the MU4 or your MU5 amendment would look like. We want to be able to show this in a fair setting. So when you get to the agenda item later down in the agenda tonight, we would really appreciate your consideration of giving us a fair chance to put out to the general public. Now, all the comment thus far has been what you're going to hear for the next however many minutes this goes on. It's all about people in the neighborhood can't stand the concept of a development like this. Well, come on. This is what your comprehensive plan said. This is what Jim Katsiafikas, your city council, says doesn't jive with the amendment, the MDR amendment. It's designed to give open space. Yes, the buildings are taller. I heard Phil Hatch on Channel 8. I tried to get a hold of the reporter myself. He called me. He said something about, well, what if they were 3 stories tall? Well, okay, let's have a discussion about that. Let's not just shut us down and try to pigeonhole us back into the MDR. So anyway, I know I'm limited to 3 minutes here and you have a lot of other people to speak, but we just want to be treated fairly, have a fair chance to we have experts here who will give you traffic, school studies. We had a team meeting the other day. We're in master plan development phase, okay? We're not even in site plan yet. And I asked one of the chief engineer, Chad Brandon, well, how far along are you? He's like 80% done with the project. Yes, we're going to get a change as we go. We aren't even in the site plan yet. So we have really been spending a lot of money, a lot of time. And again, please let's not fool ourselves or the public. This is about one project. This isn't about zoning and Saco generally. It's one project. And it's time that we had a fair shake here. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. Up next. Up next, we have Philip Hatch. Philip, you've been allowed to speak. Please go ahead and unmute and then state your name and address for the record and present your comments to council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Do you hear me okay?
We can hear you.
Okay, thank you. My name is Phil Hatch. I live at 19 Evergreen Drive. I want to read into the record a message that I had sent to all councilors and our administrator and the mayor. Included in tonight's city council meeting agenda is item 9K. It contemplates a vote for a first reading of a proposal to support an amendment to the zoning ordinance you approved on January 11th, 2021. Unfortunately, the staff provided recommendation and suggested motion contradicts the recommendation and findings of fact contained in the planning board report provided to you. It contradicts the wishes of many neighborhood citizens who steadfastly support that planning board report. When critically thinking about these contradictions, one might begin to question the inherent value of an appointed volunteer citizen board authorized to make properly vetted key land use planning decisions, whose well-documented recommendations are ignored by the city staff. Why should citizens bother to serve in these volunteer board roles? Contradictions like these seem to only stifle civic engagement and public trust. If you vote to change the Kimball Deering Trust parcel on Bradley Street from the recently approved NDR to an R5 MU district, it will effectively negate over 2 years of hard work and public comment. And it will ignore the wishes and requests of the constituents who contributed significantly in support of the MDR district. It seems to make a travesty of the democratic process. We have already presented evidence through our attorney that the MDR is in harmony with the comprehensive plan. That's been pretty clear. And we have to remind you that this change will not affect the current ordinance, which is what the Flatley project is moving forward under. It only prevents a similar development from happening should that parcel become available. So let's keep that clear as well. I've seen a little bit of the information that's been floating around at the last minute in comparing the MDR to the MU4. Nobody's really had a chance to vet that. I think it's unfair to be throwing that out on the table at the last minute. And I'm sure that if we had a chance to vet it, we could come up with some sensible arguments to that. So you have a unique chance to gain a much needed community support with your vote on this issue. I humbly ask that you ignore the suggested motion placed before you and pass an alternative motion to retain the MDR district designation for the parcel. And once and for all, leave the R5MU concept to forever rest in peace. The citizens of Saco are tuned in to hear your vote tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Up next, we have identifier Kevin Sutherland. Kevin, you've been allowed to unmute. Please go ahead and unmute, state your name and address for the record, and present to council.
Thank you, Bill. I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor and City Council. Good evening. I know you have a lot on the agenda. I'll be brief. I'd like to start by applauding your decision to approve the zoning ordinance overhaul in January. There's been a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to get across the finish line. I believe I even froze for part of that effort. So while there are areas that can be improved upon, potentially the items that are on the agenda that were previously tabled, it is a step towards achieving a long-term sustainable community that encourages smart growth, increases multimodal transit usage, and strengthens the small business environment. I really hope the council will remove from the table those items. I'm not entirely sure what you're following for Robert's rules in terms of how you remove items from the table, but items I, J, and K I hope the council will untable those and discuss them this evening so that they can go to a vote of public hearing. So again, members of the public, a public hearing, this first reading is simply just to allow the public to then speak on the item. I'd appreciate the opportunity to address each of those items and share some historical context related to the 2018 comp plan update and can provide relevant information to the council and to my fellow Saco residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Up next, we have identifier Jaisleen. You've been allowed to speak. Please go ahead and unmute, state your name and address for the record, and provide your 3 minutes to council.
Hi, this is Jaisleen Mokalich. I'm at 1 Elisha James Drive in Saco. And I'm not sure if this is the right time or not, but I wanted to know about the planning for special ed kids going back to school and how we are integrating them back in. I don't know if this is the right time or not, but my daughter is on an IEP. We need to get them back in, and we need to get the regular kids back in too. So I just need to know what the plan is.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's a very important issue that the school board will be discussing in the coming weeks as they build their OSAC plan, which is their return to school plan. And the person you should be reaching out to is Superintendent Dominic DePatsy to answer those questions and to deal with the IEPs so that we can get our children in and back to schools as much as possible.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome. Any other public comment at this time? Please use the raise hand feature or *9 to be unmuted to speak to council. Up next is John Harkins. John, you've been allowed to speak. Please go ahead and unmute, state your name and address for the record, and provide your comments to council.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Great. Mr. Chairman, members of the council, recently I've been advised that made aware of the failure of our city administration to employ an internal auditor approved 3 years ago. Such person was to teach city finances and policies. He was to track them. The position is surely needed. Such position would help ensure policies to be consistent with state law. Several items before the council do need revision and be in concert with the state statutes. For example, unclaimed tax money cannot remain with the city as proposed by the finance director. It needs to be turned over to the state. Another example deals with terminology. Personal property is not land or structures. It is real estate. Personal property deals with contents like office machinery, furniture, fixtures, etc. A suggestion may be to run these policies by the Maine Municipal Association for comment or use their models wherever appropriate. Whom, by the way, oversees the city finances while the director is on leave. I look forward to the annual audit every year. The presentation is very helpful for us to understand the city finances and to strengthen its deficiencies. This year, I lost it. Why? It was muddled in with a bunch of other items, as is typical with the council's meetings. There are too many items on here, and the council tends to bury some of these items. Lack of transparency is not a good virtue. Speaking of transparency, documents aren't being provided when requested by the municipal staff. This is clearly a violation of statutes and should be corrected. It's time to clean up this act and find somebody that can do it if it can't be done by this council. It's been going on for too long. The public deserves transparency. It deserves responsive government. And that's all I have to say. Thank you much.
Thank you, John. Up next, we have Robert Lawton. Robert, you've been allowed to speak. Please go ahead and unmute, state your name and address for the record, and present your comments to council.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. I'd like to thank the council for the opportunity to provide feedback. I did send an email earlier today concerning the Bradley Lincoln Street project, and I sent it to all council members, and I'm not sure if you've received that or not or seen it, but I just wanted to say that I support Phil Hatch's comments and the other comments concerning this project, and that I think the MDR zoning is appropriate for this project, and I urge you all to vote to approve that as recommended by the planning board. They're the people that are supposed to be looking at these things and providing expertise to the council. So I urge you to vote for that. And just a comment about spending a lot of money on this project that we heard earlier. You know, business has risk, and the risk is if you go forward prior to things being finally settled. So that, you know, I guess I don't support the issue of spending a lot of money and having that be a criteria for approval or disapproval of a project. So I support the MDR zoning for this project, and I urge you to vote for that as recommended by the planning board. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Up next, we have Monica JC. JC, you've been allowed to unmute. Please go ahead and unmute, state your name and address for the record, and provide your comments to council.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Thank you. This is Jane Karen, 264 Lincoln Street, Saco, Maine. I did send comment to the counselors, and I just want to read my comments for the record this evening. I've been and still in support of the MDR zone for my neighborhood, including the Bradley Street, Lincoln Street parcel. It's the right zone for this parcel in Ward 5 and the right decision for the city of Saco. MDR zoning of this parcel is supported by the citizens of Saco and has been recommended by the planning board, as everyone knows. In addition, I support Phil Hatch's comments concerning tonight's meeting agenda item K. And I urge you all to support the MDR zoning for the Bradley Lincoln Street parcel. We are not interested in the R5MU zoning. And I just wanted to make certain that you're aware and that your actions reflect what the citizens wish. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jane. Up next, we have Bill Zafferson. Bill, you've been allowed to unmute. Please go ahead and unmute, state your name and address for the record, and present your comments to council.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. My name is William Zafferson. I reside at 1 Cortlandt Circle, and I also am the designated spokesperson on behalf of the St. Demetrius Greek Orthodox Church that is located at 186 Bradley Street. I'd like to point out that there are 85 families who reside in Saco that are members of the Greek Church. Actually, others who have spoken before me have already articulated the comments regarding the MDR classification. We're in complete support of that. The comments that have been issued by Mr. Hatch are feelings and an opinion that we support. So I would encourage the City Council tonight to consider the MDR classification that has been recommended by the Planning Board. That's my first point. Second point is more of a question, which I may not get an answer, but I'm looking at the screen, and as you know, as we're all on Zoom calls and Zoom meetings, I find it interesting that prior to, or some of the prior meetings, you used to be able to see the number of attendees who are attending meetings, and now I don't believe that is visible anymore. Oh, now it just popped up. Now that I just mentioned that, so I'll withdraw that comment. But it was a point of interest to see how many people were showing up at our city council meetings. So it was more of a point of interest. But anyway, I will yield my time to other people because I know there are probably more behind me who also have an opinion to vent and to share. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Last call for public comment. Up next, we have Susan Bermigian. Susan, you've been allowed to unmute. Please unmute and state your name and address and present your comments to the council.
Good evening, councilors. My name is actually Paul Shaughnessy. Susan and I cohabitate at 33 Skyline Drive. Unfortunately, I don't think I am getting on there for video, so that's unfortunate. But anyhow, first and foremost, Alan Mitthorn, you and I talked last year for a couple hours about this whole situation here with this development, and I appreciate all your comments and all that you did for us. I'm not sure it's been enough, but I don't know enough because I've been very busy with the other business I own. I would like you all to ponder and think about this. Unfortunately, I can't look you in the eye. How would you feel every morning living in your house and getting up to coffee and hearing construction in your backyard for multiple years and trying to hear what your children are saying and trying to hear what your wife is saying or trying to talk on the phone or sit on the phone in a business meeting while you're at home? And look out your window and see the destruction and hear it. So that's what you will sit through for the next several years as a proud homeowner in Saco. Then you will look at what is the impact to our schools. I haven't really heard from these people. They say all these things. But fundamentally, at the end of the day, I understand flatly. I grew up in Massachusetts. I've seen all their developments, and I won't comment. And they look and they say, we spent a lot of money. I spent 30 years in international management consulting. There's risk and reward. You took the shot, you pushed it. And you said, we made the investment, you got to do it. No, that's not always true. You took the shot to try and gain leverage, and maybe it didn't work out. Especially during a COVID crisis. We, as citizens of this city, have not been allowed to propagate and come out and attend meetings. But again, my simple question to you is, each one of you, as a father, a mother, a family member, what would be your impact to your living standard, putting up with that construction for 4 or 5 years as you try and do your job or you try and raise your family, and then see what you look at afterwards? Thank you, folks. I appreciate it. Please give us a fair deal here and what is meant best for the city versus what there was a problem with in the original zoning. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Up next, we have Paula Walker. Paula, you've been allowed to unmute. Please state your name and address for the record and present your comments to council.
Hi, this is actually Kevin Walker on my wife's computer. I'm with the John Flatley Company. How are you?
We can hear you, Kevin.
Okay, great. So I just wanted to just mention a couple things to do with the MDR and the R5MU. I'm not going to get into the comments that have been made. A lot of them just aren't correct, and that's fine. I'd like to just follow up with Attorney Reed's comments that we really would like to present something to the council and explain it in a little bit more detail. And I think the picture gets a lot more clearer once we're able to explain it. So I'll second that request. I do want to say we have looked at the MDR district, and before we looked at, when we were initially looking at the site, we were looking at everything that was allowed: single family, multifamily, businesses, and obviously businesses and retail are obviously out. Everything's closing down. Everything's going online. So I mean that wasn't one of the options that would really fit there anyway. The reason we settled on the apartments was because we could provide good buffers and leave up a majority of the trees there. We also looked at single family, and in single family, basically all the trees would come down, and that's not something that we typically do, and it's not something we really want to do. So we went with the better option with a less impact to the school system, impact to the school with the apartment development as we have it now. Worst case scenario would be 50 kids. It's probably more likely 30. With a bunch of 4-bedroom homes, we're probably looking at 150, 200 kids. We have spoken with the school department. We have reports on both. Those are both in your packet with a fiscal impact statement. All that information was provided by the superintendent of schools. The fire and police came from the fire and police departments. These aren't numbers pulled out of a book. They're pulled directly from your community and the higher ups in those particular departments. We can work with the R5MU, and we can do the MDR. We just don't really have a desire to do the single family due to the impact. The impact on the city with an MDR single family district is not going to be beneficial to the city of Saco. With the apartment layout that we have now, the number of kids that are limited and so on, the net fiscal impact benefit to the city is a minimum of $335,000, $340,000, and it's probably close to $500,000. With a single family, it's a loss. And again, those numbers are in your packets. You have them. And that's really all I'd like to add at this point. I just wanted to make the Commission aware of where we stand and why we chose what we chose and why we designed it the way we did. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Up next is Ken Studman. Ken, you've been allowed to unmute. Please go ahead and unmute. State your name and address for the record and present your comments to council.
Hi, this is Terry Studman. I'm at 45 Forest Street in Saco. And I sort of wish that this conversation was totally tweaked and changed. It's unfortunately too late in the game, I believe. But the R5MU, I wish we were discussing changing the wording and the writing of that to better suit this neighborhood. Perhaps 2-story buildings with a maximum capacity in each building, or even 3 stories, or a pub, or some other way. I'm glad the Flatley Company is here to hear my statements. I think the biggest issue this neighborhood has is the height and the width of this project is just too big for this area. If they were 2 or 3-story buildings, if there were 5 of them instead of 7, or 3 of them and a brew pub going off of Lincoln Street, I think the whole neighborhood would feel differently. I do understand that the Flatley Company will definitely help preserve our forests. I'm not quite sure with the massive amounts of buildings, how much of that will actually be left due to excavators and building equipment going through. On all sides of the building have to be torn down to access to build on all sides of these buildings. I just feel it a loss that we're debating between MDR versus R5MU, when R5MU might be a better use of the land if the restrictions were changed or the ability to build on it is changed. And I also don't see how Flatley is presenting our city with something that's mixed use. You have a mega complex going in with a tiny playground by the opening. To me, that is not a multi-purpose or mixed use environment that would fit within our community. And thank you very much for your time and all of your efforts and listening to everyone. I do truly, truly appreciate it.
Thank you. Up next is Christopher Tabor. Christopher, you've been allowed to unmute. Please go ahead and do so. State your name and address for the record and provide your comments to council.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Perfect. My name's Chris Tabor. I live at 71 Forest Street in Saco. And just wanted to go on the record and voice my support in agreement with Phil Hatch's earlier comments. For me, I look at this project, I've looked at it several times. I looked at the conceptual drawings and I have to ask myself, living in this neighborhood, is this in agreement or harmony with the surrounding neighborhood? And I think if all of you were to ask yourself that similar question, the answer would be no. And for me, that tells me all I need to know about this project and whether or not it should move forward. When I look at similar projects that have been built in neighboring towns, I look at Scarborough and I look at the Beacon at Gateway that was built out on the Haggis Parkway. It's not in the middle of a residential neighborhood, and there's a reason for that. When I look to South Portland, and again at a similar project, it's literally being built next to the Home Depot. Again, not in a residential neighborhood like the one that we have here in Saco. And for those reasons, I urge you to not support this development moving forward through the zoning change. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And next up, we have an identifier with a phone number 207-602-6021. You've been allowed to unmute. Please go ahead and unmute and state your name and address for the record and provide your comments to council. If you try *6, you can hopefully unmute your phone.
Hello.
Hello. We can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
Okay. I try to do this online. All right.
Please state your name and address for the record.
I will do that. My name is Barbara Coleman. I have two addresses. First, I have a family home that I invested in, and I pay excise tax in the city of Saco. So I have an investment in the city of Saco, and what to say. Additionally, I am currently living at 1 East Grand Avenue in Old Orchard Beach. And I have stayed in constant contact with the city during this whole time. I am addressing this property from several different points of view. First, Mr. Hatch and Mrs. Hatch, back in the 1990s, requested a contract zone agreement specifically for Winter Haven in 1990 for an assisted living facility. Back in 2013, when they were ready to move, another request was put in on this property as a contract zone, and the former city administrator, without the proper approval of the planning board, at the last minute, provided council a document to execute a contract zone agreement to reverse the ability of us to collect taxes on the property at King Street and was eventually sold to Thornton Academy, where no taxes were taken out. I sued on behalf of that because proper procedure was not taken care of. Now, the property that Mr. Hatch lives on, and many people are referring to, you're talking about on the other side of the Kimball Health Center. I just heard a comment about a person in the building of buildings. Well, I used to live on Applewood Drive prior to the development of Evergreen and Hubbard and all those streets down behind that was all tree line when I purchased it in 2002. So I'm quite aware of what a development sprawl looks like because I knew eventually it was going to occur. So the plan that is before us, or at least the planning board, is the Flatley Corporation, I believe is what it's called. The fact is that at the time of their proposal, the zoning ordinances allowed for the building of the apartment buildings. Or you could build single family homes. Bill, I would rather see the apartment buildings anytime. One, we are in much needed apartment buildings here in Saco, Biddeford, Old Orchard, because there's not enough of that type of building. If you put in 157 homes, as proposed as an alternative, you're going to have homes that are less than 20 feet apart, side to side. Basically, if your bathroom sits next to the bed of a window, you're going to hear people passing gas because 20 feet is not that far away.
Mrs. Coleman, just to advise you, your time has expired. If you could just wrap up.
That my time expired? Okay. So basically, the master plan development process has been held up because of the planning board. You have individuals on this board that are in conflict, like Councilor Archer, Kelly Archer, Miss Leary. I mean, I could continue on this project because people are looking at it from one angle. If we leave it as this building, it's going to be better than having school put up there. And if a school was put up there, what do you think buses and all of that are going to do to your traffic? So this company should be grandfathered by the original zoning ordinances in place when they started the process. If it doesn't get approved that way, I will not hesitate to proceed to court because we didn't follow proper process again. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next, we have identifier HSK. HSK, you've been allowed to speak. Please go ahead and unmute and state your name and address for the record and provide your comments to council.
Hi, this is Bill Caney. I live at 3 Blackberry Lane in Saco. The first thing I'd like to do is state my support for the comments made by Phil Hatch earlier this evening. I would also just like to remind the council that procedurally, the reason that this is before you now is because at the beginning of January, there was a question regarding whether the MDR zoning designation for the Bradley Street, Lincoln Street property was in fact consistent with the comprehensive plan. You sent it back to the planning board to make that assessment. The planning board heard all of the evidence and found specifically that it was in fact consistent with the comprehensive plan, and now it's back in front of you. But what's happened is the city staff doesn't want it to be MDR. They want it to be R5MU because they want the Flatley project to go forward. So they have resisted this at every turn. But the fact of the matter is the planning board and the SOARS committee all recommended MDR, took 2 years to get there. So I urge you to go with the MDR as recommended by the planning board, which is in fact what you asked them to review and what they came back with. I also want to make the point that you should not feel compelled to go with an R5MU because the Flatley Company has a pending proposal. The Flatley Company is a very sophisticated company. When they came in and put this property under contract, we were in the midst of rezoning. They knew there was a possibility that this property may be rezoned to something other than MU4. They went ahead anyway. That's the risk they took. This is a big company. They didn't come here to do something beneficial for the city of Saco. They came here to make money, and we all know that. This is a project that will make sense for them. It's not a project that makes any sense for the city or certainly for this neighborhood. And as a result, I would urge you to go the MDR route and not do a first reading on R5MU. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Moving on, I have no hands raised for public comment. Oh. Couple more hands raised here. Up next is Betsy Carolyn. Betsy, you've been allowed to speak. Please go ahead and unmute, state your name and address for the record, and present your comments to council.
Mary Elizabeth Carolyn, 54th Street. I'm calling. I just want to support what Phil Hatch had said. I'm displeased to hear that the builder is saying that they just need a fair shake. Well, we need a fair shake too. We're going to live here. We have property here. We moved here to be in a community, and we want a fair shake too. When we've talked with the Flatley Company about the possibility of lowering the buildings or making the buildings smaller, the response was, well, we'll just put more buildings in. I know you're here, you're a business and you want to make money, but you need to work with the city. And I hope that the council isn't listening to, well, you're going to get $400,000 in revenue into the city. Well, it's going to cost the city a lot of that $400,000 for the schools, the water, and all the other amenities that we need to repair and to take on a project like this. It is huge and it just doesn't fit in our city. Thank you.
Thank you, Betsy. Okay, any other public comment that hasn't spoken already before the council? Valerie, you've been allowed to unmute. Please go ahead and unmute, state your name and address for the record, and present your comments to the city council.
Hi there, my name is Matthew Conley. We live at 310 Lincoln Street in Saco. I would just like to state for the record that I myself, as well as those that live in my household, We are in full support of the efforts made and invested by the planning board for the MDR. I live in this neighborhood. I have been a resident of Saco for 30 plus years, and I don't want this project as an abutter, but I certainly don't want it as a Saco resident either. I believe in small families, property ownership, and neighborhoods. Therefore, please support your planning board. Support the citizens and reject the R5MU. Thank you for your time. Please remember we are a small city, and think about what's best for the people that live here.
Thank you. Any other public comment that hasn't already spoke? Okay, seeing no other commenters that haven't already spoke, moving on from public comment. That brings us to item 7 of the agenda, and that is the approval of minutes for February 1st, 2021. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Councilor
Second.
McPhail, second by Councilor Minthorn. Discussion on the minutes. Roll call vote on the minutes. Councilor Archer.
Aye.
Councilor Purdy.
Yes.
Councilor Gunn.
Yes.
Councilor Berman.
Yes.
Councilor Minthorn.
Yes.
Councilor McPhail.
Yes.
Councilor Johnston.
No.
Motion passes 6-1. Moving on to item 8, consent items. There are 2 consent items. Item A is a schedule for March council meetings. And then item B is to confirm the mayor's appointment of Stefa Normantas to the Arts Commission. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Consent agenda have been motioned by Councilor Minthorn, seconded by Councilor Johnston. Any discussion? A roll call vote on the consent agenda. Councilor Archer.
Welcome, Stefa. Yes.
Councilor Purdy.
Yes.
Councilor Gunn.
Yes.
Councilor Berman.
Yes.
Councilor Minthorn.
Yes.
Councilor McPhail.
Yes.
Councilor Johnston.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. That brings us to item 9 of the agenda tonight, and that is action items. And we have a joint meeting with the school board, item A. So give us a minute here while we promote the school board up to panelists and get situated for our joint meeting with the school board. Okay. Thank you, everyone. We now have all of the school board members and all of the city council present for the joint meeting with the school board. First up is an update on city financials. City Administrator Canarath will be hearing from Finance Director Salas.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you and good evening. So I'm going to provide a summary update that goes through each of the major departments and provide some detail on the variances versus forecast that can be found starting on page 6 of the packet, and then on pages 8 and 9 is a print off of the actual expenditures year to date, the actual numbers that I'm referencing. So if you want to go to page 8 in the packet, you can follow along with some of the actual numbers. So this update is through January 2021. Overall, the city financials remain very strong. Expenses are right on target. Revenues are tracking 3% ahead of forecast. Net operating use of fund balance is at $1.3 million through January. So that's just a result of expenses continuing to flow between the large revenues that come through on the actual tax due dates. So it's always good to kind of remind ourselves 1.3 million is basically as far deep as we get on an annual basis in terms of making use of fund balance to keep our finances flowing. Something else that's changed in this budget report, there are 2 new departments being reported. The first is grants and reimbursements. This replaces what was called federal assistance in the past. And this department, both on the revenue and expenditure side, is designed to track expenses and revenues directly related to specific grants. Another new line is TIF transfers. We had reported all transfers together. However, TIF transfers are not subject to council appropriation. They're a calculation of TIF property valuations and the assessor's mill rate. So just for reporting purposes, for clarity and improving the budget, I've restructured these departments so that TIF transfers are reported separately. Okay, so now I'm going to go through the expenditure side. This report's a little bit more detailed than my past few reports. In the past, I was really only reporting departments that were ahead or significantly behind. Now I'm reporting on everything basically except those that are within 2% of their forecast, because I would consider those departments to be right on track. So those departments that are considered right on track: code enforcement, council, county tax, finance, fire, ambulance, insurance, the school budget, and transfers. Those are all within 2% of their forecast year to date. The others are detailed as follows. Assessing expenditures, 13% behind forecast. The second quarter bill for the net cost of the shared assessor was paid in February, so this is tracking a little bit behind just because of timing. Capital projects, 17% ahead of forecast. There's that pesky encumbrance for the leased fire truck that's been sort of making this account look overspent all year. That's going to be cleared upon receipt of the vehicle, which is scheduled for the first week of March. City administration, 11% behind. Dues and memberships are tracking 6,800 under budget, and utilities are tracking 6,400 under budget due to mild weather in December and January. Also, the planned travel and training schedule has been delayed due to COVID-19. 13% behind forecast. Fuel assistance and rental assistance, interestingly enough, are both tracking below forecast because of the tremendous supplemental support that the federal government has been offering those on unemployment. Many of those on unemployment actually don't meet the income thresholds that the state dictates for this assistance. So we're experiencing just a little bit of savings on these lines, actually. Code enforcement, like I said, that's right on target. I'm bringing it up here because there have been some, before it looked like perhaps this department might go over budget, but there have been some persistent open positions. So that's allowing the department to come back in line with budget. Communications, 10% behind forecast. There's just a couple software license fees that have not been billed yet. And there was a big initiative to print some copies of the City of Saco e-newsletter for those that don't have easy access to email. All of that is on hold due to the ongoing pandemic. Contingency, sorry, I got a little background noise. The hazards of working from home. Contingency, $70,000 over budget for the year. So contingency, we're struggling here, but I talked previously about the accounts receivable write-offs and also high levels of abatements due to the timing of Betty submissions. So that's really what's going on in contingency. Fringe benefits are 7% ahead of forecast. That's, again, another timing issue. The February Health Trust bill was paid in January. Workers' comp renewal has also come in $200,000 over last year's premiums. And although we typically budget the calendar year in the next year's fiscal year because we don't know the calendar year renewals until they come in. But this is going to be a challenge for us through the rest of this fiscal year in terms of being over budget. It will be a challenge for us budgeting next year. Our HR team is actively working on several strategies to bring this premium back down. Grants and reimbursements. So again, this is that new line. Grant expenses and federal government reimbursable expenses have been consolidated here. Expenses have been properly separated from revenues and allocated to the correct lines. $90,263 in expenditures spent this year is largely offset by $123,525 in grant funding through the Keep Maine Healthy grant. That revenue was actually booked in fiscal year 2020, fell to the unassigned fund balance as part of the year-end close. And so the unassigned fund balance is essentially now covering these costs in 2021. Human resources, 18% behind forecast. Several initiatives were delayed, but are now in progress thanks to the current working group in the HR department. They're doing a great job getting some stuff off the ground. Information technology, 3% behind forecast. Several software licenses have not yet been billed. Parks and Recreation, 24% behind forecast. Again, the global pandemic continues to significantly limit recreation programs. $284,760 saved in expenses is really offset by revenues, which are $410,000 behind forecast. As the COVID numbers come down, vaccination numbers go up. I'm sure we're all hoping to see some more activity on our recreation side. Planning and economic development, 19% behind forecast. Most of this underspend is related to several projects currently in progress, including the comprehensive plan. Police department, 7% behind forecast. So this department has several open positions, which are on track to be filled, but not until closer to the end of the fiscal year. A portion of this underspend is offset by revenues not received from the state on the MDEA program. Public Works, 14% behind forecast. Public Works has been challenged to expend the remaining balances on the infrastructure bonds, finish the new Public Works facility, and simultaneously progress their sort of annual calendar projects, while at the same time juggling reduced staffing levels because of COVID. So as the weather warms, I think this department will probably encumber a lot of those funds so that we can catch up over the summer. City Solicitor, 39% ahead of forecast. So pressure on this line remains high. There was heavy spending out of it in the first part of the year. So something to be cognizant of as we continue through the last 6 months of the fiscal year. And supported entities, 7% behind forecast. Several relatively large funding requests have not yet come in. That includes MMA, TATV, and the Conservation Commission. Are there any questions on the expenditure side? Okay, I'm gonna switch over to revenues. So building rentals, 36% behind forecast. We've talked about this in the past. There was just a timing issue with when we invoiced for those rentals. We've cleaned up that process in the receivables department. City clerk revenues, 14% behind forecast. Again, this has to do with fewer general assistance reimbursement requests being submitted to the state. So the state typically reimburses us about 2/3 of our general assistance requests, but because the because the actual expenditures for general assistance are down, so are revenues from the state. Code enforcement revenues 18% ahead of forecast. Permit and construction activity remains quite strong. Communications revenues 5% ahead of forecast. I do think it's safe to say that cable is not something that people have elected to turn off during this quarantine period. Finance revenues 48% ahead of forecast. This has to do with the timing of liens. Liens have been delayed by 60 days per the state order, but we continue to collect interest through that time period. So I think more individuals chose to delay when they paid the city back. Or I apologize, paid their tax bills. Finance ambulance revenue is right on target. Interest earnings, 90% behind forecast. We've talked about this in the past. Interest rates on the city's purchase agreement are down 90%. So our interest revenues are as well. Miscellaneous transfers. So the remaining balance on a completed capital project was budgeted under mis transfers and booked under capital projects. So those two numbers offset each other. Planning and development activity. So that's tracking 61% behind forecast. The activity just isn't where it was in the year prior. We also had the issue of double booking revenue last year and budgeted against that double booked revenue. So we got to take a look at this revenue line in the coming fiscal year. Police department, 70% behind forecast. A big chunk of this, again, is the MDEA program. So we're not getting the revenue from the state, but we're also not paying to staff that position. Public Works, 21% ahead of forecast. The city exercised an abundance of caution in budgeting that no new cars would be purchased during the spring quarantine period, but people did buy new cars, and so this revenue is coming in strong. The surplus revenue will offset the loss of interest income, and that's something that we'll be looking to pull back up to a more normal level for fiscal year 2022. Real and personal property, 4% ahead of forecast. Probably a matter of timing. Revenues should come in very close to budget year's end. We had a very tight MVR this year. Sale of city assets, right on target. State assistance, 7% ahead of forecast. So state revenue sharing has come in $300,000 above forecast year to date. This is offset by lower than forecasted homestead exemption and state Betty. Homestead exemption and state Betty are two other revenue lines where it's really controlled by the MVR form submitted and handled by the assessor's department. So the fact that these are coming in lower than anticipated isn't a serious issue, I would say. And again, it's offset by strong state revenue sharing. And finally, unallocated is $6,500 above budget. The city spent less than anticipated on a new sidewalk plow, which meant that we had a check come back out of the final balance in the escrow. That revenue will offset future interest payments. Are there any questions on the revenue side?
Thank you, Finance Director Salas. I don't see any questions, so please continue.
That is everything I had for the budget update on the city side.
Okay. Thank you, Glennis, for that presentation. Up next, we will hear an update on the school financials. And I believe we're going to hear from Finance Director DiDonato.
Sure. Good evening. Currently, we're operating at 57.31% of our operating budget. We should be, in theory, through the end of January at 58.3%. This is approximately $430,000 savings in our expenditure lines. That trend does seem to look like it's going to be continuing based on my forecast from January through the end of the year right now. Areas of savings, as far as departments are concerned, all the schools will be coming in at budget or a little bit of a surplus, but pretty much on point. The one school that we're going to have a significant surplus in is Saco Middle School. We did have two positions that left, either one at the end of this year and one during the year, and we elected not to refill the position to help offset our budgeted expenditures. So that is one area that we'll have significant savings in. As the second area will be transportation. The lack of the 5-day runs, as well as less participation for payroll and additional trips will cause quite a bit of savings in the transportation line. So I do anticipate a surplus of approximately $500,000 this year. That's at least where we're on schedule right now. Nothing has changed since our last meeting as far as surprise expenses. Our revenues do also look to be on point. Currently, our main care billing has gone to our 50% mark through billing through the middle of December. So we're actually currently trending to have a better surplus in the main care, but right now it's too hard to forecast based on whether or not there'll be any further closures. So other than that, I don't have anything that has changed since our last meeting last month. Again, hopefully we'll be able to cut about half of our negative fund balance from prior year, which is definitely a step in the right direction. I don't know if there's any certain questions from the council based on our last finance meeting that we had 2 weeks ago, where we went a little more in depth, but I have nothing really new to report at this time.
Thank you, Jason. Any questions for Finance Director DiDonato on presentation of the school budget, where it stands? Okay, so now we're going to move on to, at this point, item A3, which is a discussion between council and school boards. So is there anyone who would like to open up with some discussion?
Mr. Mayor.
School Board Member Tardif.
Maybe a little different what you want, but for the last year, I live up on Lincoln Street. I've lived there for 79 years. And my phone's been ringing off the hook. I thought I was back on the city council because they thought I was part of this project behind Kimball Health. And all I will say from what I've been hearing is that with the traffic problem we're going to have up there, with what we've already got, with what all Mike Leon's developments over the years in Hubbard Street and all that, with this type of development, why people were calling me, I don't know, other than they knew that I used to be a counselor in that ward. And I will say this, with the traffic problem we're going to have between Bradley Street and Lincoln Street, and the kids that we're going to get to go into those schools, the city council better make a good decision when they make that decision, because we're going to need a lot more money to run our schools. There's going to be a large number of new kids. And I just wanted to say this to the city council. I wanted to come on earlier, but I'd rather let you people have your council meeting, and I thought I'd bring it up to you now and just make you aware. It's gonna, with the traffic problem we already have in the morning, which runs into North Street, which you're all aware of, it's not gonna get any better. It's gonna get a lot worse. So just be careful when you make that decision on which way you're gonna go. Thank you.
Thank you, School Board Member Tardif. Any Councilor Archer?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is I'd say within the last week, I've received maybe 5 or 6 messages. I don't want to say I've received a lot, but I've received 5 or 6. And in my time as council, when you get 5 or 6 on one significant issue, I can generalize it to my ward at least. Is there any discussion on whether we are going to go back to a 4 to 5 day school week? Sorry, my apologies. This is what people are asking me, and I just figured now that I have you, I could directly ask you. The second part is, it's not really a question, but possibly an offering, is I'd like to see if there's any way that the city can help the school with potentially receiving vaccine specifically for our school department. I think if we are to get the teachers back into those into the classrooms. I think the city, again, I don't know what authority we have because we are separate entities, don't get me wrong, but even just a joint message to the state on, hey, we're really going to try to prioritize getting our teachers our vaccinations, and because I see that as another route to getting our kids back into the classroom. So the first one's more of a question. The second one is just kind of a wish of my own. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Archer. School Board Chair LaFortune, would you like to take that on where the school board is and as far as preparation for returning back to school? I know there's been some discussions and the OSAC group meets this coming week on Wednesday or Thursday to start presenting. But do you have more information to present?
I don't have any specific information at the moment. The school board does continue to also get lots of feedback from parents and teachers and others in the community about the desire to get back into school as close to, if not full time. That is stuff that is coming in not only, to the council, but to the school board probably on a daily basis. There are also a number of school board members who also have kids in school who want to have us achieve the same thing. I'm only going to speak for myself. My personal opinion is that the budget process that we're about to continue on Wednesday night has to include that as a goal in terms of what we put together for a budget. In my opinion, we can't go forward with a budget that continues to only be in limited cohorts like we are now. We have to target whatever we're going to put forth for next year's budget in a way that it makes it possible to do as much full-time as possible. That's just my personal opinion, but that's something that's going to shake out through the budget process.
Thank you.
Thank you, School Board Chair LaFortune. Councilor Archer, did that answer your question?
Yeah, it was kind of an on-the-spot question, so it's not like I was looking for a thesis on it, but I just wanted an update, so thank you.
Fair enough. Councilor Berman?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm wondering if we get an update about the state list, school construction, where we are, and if there's any information about budgetary implications of that for next year.
School Superintendent DePatsy, do you want to answer where we are with the DOE? I know there's been discussions, and I know Department of Education Director Brown is kind of basically telling the school department that it's time to start looking at land opportunities, but maybe you can provide a little more insight for folks.
Sure. Yeah. So first of all, just to go back to the immunization, or if we could get help with that from the city for our teachers, that would be great. So any joint work on that would be awesome. So, and I have a lot more information on OSAC that's coming out after Wednesday, so we can talk about that. For school construction, we are ready to hopefully by March 8th. And I think, Jennifer, we meet that Thursday of that week. The infrastructure committee will start opening the bids for the architect. That starts the whole process rolling. I have talked with the mayor. I think the mayor is going to be bringing, we're having a small group to kind of discuss like what should make up the school construction committee. So we're starting that process as well to make recommendations to each side. I did ask the mayor to bring to you all to help with the cost of the architect, because it's about $250,000 for next year to start that whole process. So those are the things that are starting. We have to identify land in the next couple months on both sides. So there's going to be a linear list that you will all have sooner than later. So we are starting the process. Our infrastructure committee will be running that process. There's a lot of work out of that. So I hope that helps.
Thank you, Superintendent DePatsy. Councilor Berman, did that answer your question?
It did. It helped quite a bit. Do we have any idea about costs for next year other than the architect? And are there other?
That's like a bundled cost that Scott Brown has told us for many, many years. You need to, in the first year when you get anointed to start the process, put in about $250,000 in. Mike Garrity knows that. I've known that. I think we've talked about it the last school construction committee. Some of you have been on that. So it's around $250,000. So If the city can do that to help us out so we can get schools reopened for September, that would be huge. So.
Thank you.
Just so everyone's aware, I have asked Brian to include that in the city administrator's budget, or if he could not include that in the city administrator's budget, to provide an amendment for that to bring to the council as we go through the budget process. Councillor Archer?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. You may have just clarified it for me, but I was going to piggyback on Councillor Burnham's. And I was just trying to comprehend what you just said. Is it going? Now it sounds like the school budget construction is going to be a line item of the city. Is that what I just heard from the mayor? From you?
Well, it goes to a multiple of things. What we were talking about last year. And about getting a new facilities agreement, an updated facilities agreement that will essentially go back to what Councilor Archer, you were talking about before with that lease or leasee agreement. And if that's the case, then there are buildings and so the budget amendment for the $250,000 upfront cost in preparation for overall school construction, when we would have to go out and actually get a bond and go through the bonding process, resides, in my opinion, with the city.
Okay. Yes, I actually am in agreement because I wasn't quite sure. And I guess now the question's to you. Is it possible that we can clearly identify costs that are related to the project so that there's, now for our finance directors, it may be in 15 different locations, and I understand why the line items, but can there be a side ancillary line item that just kind of groups it all together so that when we see 250,000 in construction, it's not broken down by 15,000 in different line items. And it's more not for the auditing or something like that, just for the council and the city to see that when we set aside 250, there's a direct purpose of those funds.
Finance Director DiDonato, you have your hand up, and then is that a possibility?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of give you a little background history on how the school construction works, at least as far as the renovation construction. Accounting is done the same way as a new construction. We treat it as a separate fund or a special revenue services. I think you're familiar with more so is the terminology. So when any type of an expenditure comes our way that's directly affecting that project, the state asks that we completely separate it from our general fund or any other special revenue funds. So we'll have a specific account for you. But if you would like to just see maybe have a working Google Doc listing what the expenses are, we can do that very clearly as well for you too. But yes, anything that we do for expenses will be segregated away from our general fund or any other expenses or any other special revenue funds.
Okay, from that explanation, no, I'm all set. I just wanted to make sure that we weren't merging all the funds into one to make it look confusing. Keep it nice and simple as possible. And it sounds like Jason has a process for that. So thank you, Jason.
Finance Director Salas, did you want to add anything? You're muted, Glennis.
Thank you. I apologize.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I believe the most appropriate place to put the budget amendment would be to amend up the school appropriation portion of the general fund budget, which would then allow Jason to book an entry that ties out to that increase, which would then move the funds into his special revenue funds. I think that's probably the cleanest way to approach this from an accounting perspective.
Thank you, Finance Director Salas. Councilor Johnston.
Thank you. Director Salas kind of just hit where I was going to go with this, because we've carried this line, or the schools have carried this line on their books in the past. And so I just kind of envision this as the city being a revenue source, where we'll allocate those funds into a fund for them to, dispense. Outside of that, I was just going to throw my support behind Chair LaFortune's earlier comments. As the school board's preparing their budget, my personal feeling on this is that they should be doing so with the anticipation and whatever those costs are, they need to figure out now to get kids back into school 100% in the fall. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Johnston. Finance Director DiDonato.
Just one quick follow-up. I think what we can also do, and Glenn, Mayor, if you guys decide to do an amendment during the budget process, maybe we talked with our lawyers on how to set it up so that it's a separate item to be voted on at the city council final budget meeting that's separate from the general fund, kind of very similar to our adult education. I think that would be the easiest way to do that. And also, if we don't spend all 250,000, like it's 245,000, the other 5,000 get transferred back to the city. So it's something I can definitely look into and get better terminology as we get going in the budget process.
Thank you, Jason. Any other discussion at this time?
Mr. Mayor.
School Board Chair LaFortune.
So just coming back to the facilities and school construction topic, just briefly, what kind of support in terms of identifying land that the city may be aware of, but we haven't even gotten that far down the path, could we look to the city to help with? I mean, you guys obviously have a little more flexibility when it comes to long-term planning around citing things, whether it's a fire station or public works or other things that when the state comes to us and says, all right, now it's time to go, it would be nice to at least have some idea ahead of time what might actually be available to us out in the landscape.
Sure, I think the city would be more than happy to help you identify locations. I can probably imagine that some of that work has already been done, and it would just be revisiting some of that work that took place back in 2016 timeframe, and then probably some stuff that happened actually before that too. But as you know, there's plenty of opportunities for land, I think, and the city, I'm sure, can help you identify plots that make sense.
Right. So as I recall that from then, and granted it was a while ago, it was looking, I mean, to oversimplify it, it was almost like going to Zillow right now and seeing what's available for land. That's what I recall the discussion being centered around, was what was actually available for sale right now today in the city of Saco, as opposed to something more along the lines of the city has identified some parcels that could be available at some point down the road, but may not necessarily be available.
I would have to ask planning for a more detailed analysis of what's available and what's not. Superintendent DePatsy.
Yeah, the first thing you have to do, Kevin, is, and this is where the mayor can help, and actually the council, you have to identify all Saco-owned land. What do you own? Schools, any type of public land that we have, that's the first step. And if there's any pieces of land that you could build a K-2 school, 3 to 5 mega school, whatever it is whatever they're gonna try to fund, you have to do that first. Then you would go out and look for purchasing. So there's like a twofold process to it. I think we kind of know what we own, the Saco land. So,
thank you, Superintendent DePatsy. Any further discussion? Okay, I see School Board Member Johnston.
She's muted.
Beth, I went ahead and asked you to, oh, there you go.
I got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
I wanted to just say that having been on the construction committee in the past, one of the concerns that I have today, as I did in the past, is that there is not a lot, we do not have a lot of options from what we were informed in the past of where land that would be suitable to place a school on. So I think that this is a really crucial question, and I don't know what the answer is, but certainly it's a question that we really need to seek the answer to quickly, because, you know, we've eaten up a lot of land with residential development in the city of Saco. So I just wanted to emphasize that I appreciate the superintendent chiming in on the process, so to speak, of, you know, looking for land, but I am concerned that we don't have a lot of options. So just a piece, I mean, and then at the same time, some of the information that was given to us back in the day may not have been fully vetted. There may be answers that we didn't properly get at the time, but it is a concern. Thank you.
Thank you, School Board Member Johnston. Any other discussion? Okay, seeing no hands raised.
Mayor?
School Board Member Johnston.
Mr. Mayor?
School Board Member Johnston.
Another thought that came to me that you can hear me?
We can hear you.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Beth. There may be a delay happening, but we can hear you.
You can?
Yes.
Okay. I will attempt to make my point. On our Finance Committee agenda on February 10th, we had under 1A, we had a question that I'd like to have Jason address, which was the write-off of trip transportation of $32,247. And it's a bit confusing, but Jason, if you could bring that to the attention of the council, maybe they already know, but it would be helpful, I think, to talk about that.
Sure. So the reason why I brought this up in our last finance meeting was it was one of the unknown expenses that I will have to write off this year. So to give a little bit of background history, during the summertime pre-COVID, Parks and Rec would have their summer program with students attending their programs and taking field trips. When they took field trips to certain locations like Aquaboggin, Splashtown, just wherever various areas they went, we supplied the bus drivers, excuse me, we provide the bus drivers and the buses as well as the gas. So what we would do for per trip, our bus transportation department creates a bill, sends it to the transportation department stating these are how many hours our bus drivers were driving, $1 per mile to cover the fuel and the repair cost. So we had 3 years of billing that. So every month I get that for July and August. I'd book it as an accounts receivable, anticipating getting the revenue from the city side, something we've done in the past for many, many years. I think there was a slight miscommunication between the Parks and Rec and the school department when the new director, Ryan Summers, came in. The anticipation was that it was because it's a it's a city program, we're all one unit, that cost shouldn't be shared. We did use the facilities over at the community center. I think that's where Director Summers' main sticking point was, that we use the facilities for pre-K, so therefore it kind of offsets the expenses. What happened was for 3 years it was on our books. Finally, I was trying to clean it up, and I know it's late, and we've been trying to get this resolved, and it just came down to where we have to write it off because the program, obviously with COVID, the Parks and Rec program is struggling significantly. Some of the things that came up with this was the argument of facilities usage. It goes to the larger discussion, Mr. Mayor, about our facilities usage and our agreements. The argument of that we were using the Parks and Rec program. The argument the school department had, or at least on the finance side, was that the infrastructure is already there. Doesn't really cost much of an increase for expenditures besides a little bit of utilities. Anything that needed to be changed in that building, the school department paid for. We had direct costs by having to hire personnel, which we normally don't pay for during the summertime, unless they're doing these specific trips or they're doing summer school programming. There's also other expenditures that we get charged for on the city side with Public Works. You guys have a mechanic that is on staff full time. We get charged an hourly rate for any hour that they work on our buses, even though it's city-owned buses and we're all one unit. So that was kind of the arguments going back and forth about what should we be really charging each other's unit? Should we even be charging anybody? Or should we all just kind of be reflecting this in our expenditure budget, knowing that we're both the city and the school department is one unit, even though we do have two separate tax ID numbers. So that's kind of where I had to bring that up last month. That was the only new surprise expenditure of $32,000 and some change that we will have to be making a journal entry on our side as an expenditure instead of a revenue that we anticipated. I hope that cleared up. I know it's kind of a lot of quick background for the meeting, but if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer that.
Any questions for Finance Director DiDonato? Okay. Any other further discussion? Seeing no hands raised and no school board member or counselor seeking recognition, we will move on. School board members, thank you for joining us this evening for a joint meeting and getting an update on both the city and the school financial side. We are going to take a 5-minute recess. There's no objection. While we migrate folks here off the screen. So let's come back at 8:12. Back, everyone. Good to go. Thank you, Andrew. We're now back from recess, and we are at item B on the agenda, and that is a public hearing on amendments to Saco City Code, Chapter 112, General Assistant Program Appendices, and that is Councilman Minthorn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Each year, Maine Municipal Association presents municipalities with new appendices for the city ordinance, which need to be reviewed and adopted. The staff recommends approval of the 2020-2021 General Assistance Ordinance Appendices A through H. I move to open the public hearing on the amendments to Saco Code Chapter 112 General Assistance Program Appendices.
Motion's been made by Councilor Minthorn. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Second by Councilor Gunn. Any discussion on opening the public hearing? Roll call vote. Councilor Archer.
Aye.
Councilor Purdy.
Yes.
Councilor Gunn.
Yes.
Councilor Berman.
Yes.
Councilor Minthorn.
Yes.
Councilor McPhail.
Yes.
Councilor Johnston.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 to open the public hearing on the amendments to Saco City Code Chapter 112 General Assistance Programs Appendices at 8:15 p.m. The public hearing is now open on this matter. If there's anyone who wishes to speak, please use the raise hand feature of the Zoom platform or *9, and you'll be unmuted to speak to the council on this matter. Seeing no hands raised and nobody seeking recognition, Councilor Minthorn.
Thank you. I move to close the public hearing and further move to schedule the final reading for March 1st, 2021.
Motion's been made by Councilor Minthorn. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Gunn. Any discussion on closing the public hearing? Roll call vote. Councilor Archer.
Aye.
Councilor Purdy.
Yes.
Councilor Gunn.
Yes.
Councilor Berman.
Yes.
Councilor Minthorn.
Yes.
Councilor McPhail.
Yes.
Councilor Johnston.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Close the public hearing at 8:17 p.m. That moves us on to item C, public hearing on the establishment of a city historian. Councilor Minthorn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A city historian would provide advisory and informational assistance to council, city staff, and boards and committees, as well as provide educational outreach for the general public and schools. This would be a part-time, non-employee position with a 3-year appointment nominated by the mayor and confirmed by council. The proposed revision to the city code has been vetted by the city solicitor. Staff recommends approval. I move to open the public hearing.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilor Minthorn, second by Councilor Johnston to open the public hearing. Any discussion on opening the public hearing? Roll call vote. Councilor Archer.
Aye.
Councilor Purdy.
Yes.
Councilor Gunn.
Yes.
Councilor Berman.
Yes.
Councilor Minthorn.
Yes.
Councilor McPhail.
Yes.
Councilor Johnston.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 to open the public hearing at 8:18 p.m. Anyone The public hearing is now open. Anyone wishing to speak to the city council on this matter, please use the raise hand feature of Zoom or *9 if you're calling from a cellular phone. Seeing no hands raised, Councilor Minthorn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to close the public hearing and further move to schedule the second and final reading for the establishment of a city historian for March 1st, 2021.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilor Minthorn, second by Councilor Berman. Discussion on closing the public hearing and setting the final reading. A roll call vote. Councilor Archer.
Aye.
Councilor Purdy.
Yes.
Councilor Gunn.
Yes.
Councilor Berman.
Yes.
Councilor Minthorn.
Yes.
Councilor McPhail.
Yes.
Councilor Johnston.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. We are now at item D, one reading of the approval of the City of Saco purchasing policy. Councilor Gunn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In December, the Finance Department completed an ambitious review of all existing policies. This revised purchasing policy includes language changes to bring the old policy in line with changes made to accounts payable processes and to improve compliance. Several needed changes to improve department efficiency have also been included. Process updates are highlighted in yellow, process changes are highlighted in green, and language to maintain compliance with uniform guidance is in gray. The staff does recommend approval. Be it ordered that the City Council approve the revisions to the City of Saco purchasing policy. I move to approve the order.
Motion's been made by Councilor Gunn. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Purdy. Discussion on the revising of the purchasing policy. Councilor Johnston.
Thank you. On page 37 of our packet, under letter D, which is control of contract, bid extensions, and renewals, there's some new language that's been added. And it says, where a vendor is deemed of systemic importance to the organization, goes on to speak to that. I'm just curious, who's deeming something of systemic importance? The reason I ask that is because I can think of times in the past where council had decided it was advantageous to, say, move on from a banking institution or use it, or change the payroll processor. And I wouldn't want to be in a situation where a staff member has decided at some point to enter into a long-term contract with one of these potential institutions and then have our hands tied. So I'm just curious where this came from and why it was viewed as important. Thank you.
That's in section 12D. Thank you. Finance Director Salas, welcome back. Thank you for joining us again.
Thank you. Yes. So to respond to Councilor Johnston's question, the reason that this was added is that generally a contract is entered into for 3 years. We didn't want to have departments forced to go back to market for services simply because the purchasing policy said you had to go back to market. I mean, again, it's in yellow because this is sort of the way we have done business in the past. We haven't changed our financial software in 16 years. We haven't changed banking institutions in 9 years. I'm not saying that we have to, again, in cases where the service is no longer such that the city is receiving what it needs to operate successfully, then of course we want to be able to go to market. But we also don't want to be forcing departments to make changes, because these sort of systemic changes can be disruptive not only to the department that maybe manages the software, but also to the peripheral departments, public works, public safety, because a lot of different people may be impacted. So that's where it becomes systemic importance, where you're impacting not just one department, but multiple departments. And also anytime you're engaging, certain changes can create financial risk. And that's just the nature of those changes. So we didn't want to be forcing people to go out to market or to change vendors just for the sake of it.
Finance Director Salas, is this much like the issue we had a couple of years ago where the policy said that the council or that the city needed to go out and I might not get the wording right here, but basically go out for a go out for a garbage waste disposal service. But because of the waste disposal service, we were getting such a good price. And if we went out to market, we'd lose that price that we had locked in through our current waste provider. And there was a concern about going outside and going through that purchasing policy and getting the bids, that we might lose our current vendor rating with that vendor, I guess is the way to, am I on the right path here?
Absolutely. I would say waste management is another great example because it's of systemic importance. Now, it might be only one city department that's impacted, but it would be every citizen in the city of Saco that could be impacted by such a disruptive change. So we just don't want we don't want departments to feel obligated to go back out to propose or to bid just because. And I do think, we don't want to be overly prescriptive in the language, but it is certainly at council's discretion to request an understanding of why one particular service has been deemed of systemic importance. And a department head who's responsible for that service should be prepared to explain it. So it could be financial software, it could be waste management, but I didn't want to say, okay, here's the checklist necessarily. I think that's best left to a continuing conversation between the city administrator, the council, and department heads.
Thank you, Finance Director Salas. Councilor Justin, does that answer your question?
Yes. I mean, I think I definitely better understand it. Again, I can see where it may have been restrictive in the past and enforcing a change. I guess I'm comfortable with it. I think that when I first was reading this, I was looking at it thinking that there probably should be some kind of reporting back to council to understand that we're perhaps not, changing contract or whatnot. But I guess I will leave that with at the discretion of the administrator to kind of report that back. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very collaborative. We'll bring it back. Don't worry.
Any other discussion on the updates to the the purchasing policy? Okay. A roll call vote on the purchasing policy. Councilor Archer.
Aye.
Councilor Purdy.
Yes.
Councilor Gunn.
Yes.
Councilor Berman.
Yes.
Councilor Minthorn.
Yes.
Councilor McPhail.
Yes.
Councilor Johnston.
Yes.
The motion passes 7-0. Moving on to item E, one reading, approval of the City of Saco investment policy. Councilor Gunn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In December, the Finance Department completed an ambitious review of all existing policies. This revised investment policy includes the following needed changes: updated standards for investment partners, simplified language, and streamlined reporting requirements. The new policy also requires that no more than 50% of the city's funds be invested in any one institution. Staff recommends approval. Be it ordered that the City Council approve the new City of Saco investment policy. I move to approve the order.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilor Gunn, second by Councilor Minthorn. Discussion on the approval of the City of Saco investment policy. Seeing no hands raised and no councilor seeking recognition, a roll call vote. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Minthorn?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Moving on to item F, one reading, approval of City of Saco disposition of city property policy. Councilor Gunn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In December, the Finance Department completed an ambitious review of all existing policies. This disposition of city property policy combines the language from two existing policies: the disposition of tax or sewer lien acquired property policy and personal property disposition policy. The policy brings the disposition of tax or sewer lien acquired property in line with current city practices while still adhering to Maine state law. Disposition of city property, excluding real estate, is greatly simplified. Disposition of city real estate is still governed by Chapter 81. The language has been reviewed with all finance department managers and with senior staff. Be it ordered that the City Council approve the new disposition of city property policy and furthermore remove the following policies which it replaces, which is the disposition of tax or sewer lien acquired property policy and personal property disposition policy. I move to approve the order.
Motion's been made by Councilor Gunn. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Minthorn. Discussion. Seeing no hands, excuse me, seeing no hands raised and no councilor seeking recognition, a roll call vote. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Minthorn?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
A motion passes 7-0. Brings us to item G, one reading, approval of City of Saco billing and collections policy. Councilor Gunn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In December, the Finance Department completed an ambitious review of all existing policies in order to update the language, cover topics not currently regulated, and to meet council requests. This collection policy combines the language from three existing policies: the ambulance cash collection policy, collection of personal property taxes, and the easy pay policy. Additionally, it provides language authorizing transfer of unpaid bills to collections agency and authorizes the finance director to write off unpaid amounts less than $1,000 that meet certain criteria. This updated policy will greatly improve the city's ability to manage accounts receivable. The language has been reviewed with all finance department managers and with senior staff. Staff recommends approval. Be it ordered that the City Council approve the new billing and collections policy and furthermore remove the following policies which it replaces: ambulance cash collection policy, collection of personal property taxes, and the easy pay policy. I move to approve the order.
Motion's been made by Councilor Gunn. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Second by Councilor Minthorn. Discussion on approval of the City of Saco billing and collections policy. Seeing no hands raised and no councilor seeking recognition, Roll call vote. Councilor Archer.
Aye.
Councilor Purdy.
Yes.
Councilor Gunn.
Yes.
Councilor Berman.
Yes.
Councilor Minthorn.
Yes.
Councilor McPhail.
Yes.
Councilor Johnston.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Thank you very much. Moving on to item H, first reading, budget amendment number 1, finance staffing, and that is Councilor Purdy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This funding will enable the finance department to meet the operational needs through the end of the fiscal year. City staff recommends approval. Be it ordered that the City Council approves the first reading of the budget amendment number 1 for fiscal year 2021 and moves to schedule a second and final reading for March 1st, 2021. I move to approve the order.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilor Purdy, second by Councilor Minthorn. Discussion on the budget amendment.
Mr. Mayor.
City Administrator.
Thank you. If I could, just for the public's knowledge also. So the budget amendment is $65,000, and this is to cover 2 anticipated leaves in the finance department, as well as some ongoing staffing issues due to the COVID pandemic situation. So in total, that's going to be, we have $65,000 for the current fiscal year.
Thank you, City Administrator Cadenrath. Any questions on the finance, on the budget amendment? Seeing no hands raised and no councilor seeking recognition, roll call vote. Councilor Archer.
Yes, the need stands on its own.
Did you say yes, Councilor Archer? I'm sorry.
Yes, the need stands on its own.
Thank you. Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Minthorn?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. That brings us to item I, which was tabled from February 8th, 2021. Is there a motion to untable this item?
So moved.
Councilor McPhail, is there a second?
I'll second.
Second, Councilor Berman. Roll call vote to untable item I, which is was tabled on February 8th. It's a first reading. Vote to accept the planning board report and set public hearing for March 8th, 2021 for the zoning ordinance amendment to add master plan development as a permitted use in the Portland Road District. Councilor Archer.
Aye.
Councilor Purdy.
Yes.
Councilor Gunn.
Yes.
Councilor Berman.
Yes.
Councilor Minthorn.
Yes.
Councilor McPhail.
Yes.
Councilor Johnston.
Yes.
Motion on the table passes 7-0. Councilor Johnston, I think this is your motion. Do you want to read it or would you like somebody else to read it?
Well, respectfully, I mean, while I do agree with accepting the planning board report, I've voiced my opposition previously, both through the ZORS committee and when this was before us several weeks ago. So I think it would probably be more appropriate if somebody else is willing to make the motion.
Thank you, Councilor Johnston. Is there a councilor willing to make the motion?
Mr. Mayor, I'll accept it.
Thank you, Councilor McPhail.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The amendment for adding the master plan development as a permitted use in the Portland Road District was brought forth as part of the zoning ordinance approval process at the January 11th, 2021 council meeting. Upon consultation with legal counsel, it was advised that the city council refer the amendment back to the planning board for review, public hearing, and report to the city council. Based upon section 230-1401B of the zoning ordinance. The planning board held the public hearing on this amendment on February 2nd, 2021. After discussion, the board voted 7-0 in support of its December 1st, 2020 recommendation that master plan development be removed from the Portland Road zoning district, and that the board's goal will be to refine the MPD standards for incorporating into the ordinance in the near future. Staff recommends that the City Council hold the first reading, vote to accept the Planning Board report, and set the public hearing for March 8th, 2021 to add master plan development as a permitted use to the portion of the Portland Road District north of Cascade Road and north of Spring Hill Road. I move to accept the Planning Board report as submitted.
Second.
There's been a motion to accept the Planning Board report made by Councilor McPhail, second by Councilor Minthorn. Discussion on accepting the Planning Board report. Seeing no hands raised and nobody seeking recognition.
Nope. Jim Purdy.
Councilor Purdy.
Thank you. This is really a point of clarification for me. The motion was right. By accepting the motion as read, I move to accept the Planning Board as report as submitted. That will not put the public hearing, that will not schedule the public hearing for March 8th. Am I correct?
I believe there's going to be a follow-up motion, Councilor Purdy. I think there's a motion here to accept the Planning Board.
I understand. Thank you. Just wanted to make sure.
Yep.
Exactly what I was voting on here. Thank you.
Yep. Councilor Minthorn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Having attended the Planning Board meeting where this was discussed, Mike Eon had a list of about 6 ideas, as I recall, of ways this should be tweaked that could certainly make it a much better document, better amendment than it is currently. I would hope that Mike could work with the planning staff and possibly provide some kind of a cut sheet of possible amendments for council so that when this comes to the public hearing, these might be available and then incorporated into the second and final reading to fix and put some Band-Aids in place where they're needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Minthorn. Councilor Johnston.
Thank you. I would agree with Councilor Minthorn's comments. I mean, having been through this process for 2+ years now, I mean, we spend many hours on this topic specifically, and I don't really ever recall anybody in those meetings being opposed to master plan developments in the Portland Road. You know, but through that ZORS process and the Planning Board process, we kind of all arrived at the same conclusion, which the densities proposed under the MPDs were problematic as they are today. I mean, really, this kind of started to unravel back when we still had the consultants with the ZOR process, and we initially had what were being called nodes. You know, we never could really arrive at exactly where those should be located. And ultimately they were scratched, and then the MPDs were applied to the entire district, which is where the problem occurred. But again, I think there's serious implications if you leave them the way they are. You know, I understand, as I've heard stated on several of these amendments previously, that there's concerns about consistency with the comp plan. Well, I've stated it before, and I'll say it again, we can wrap ourselves in pretzels trying to determine what is and what isn't consistent. I mean, I think one could argue the sheer fact that we took 6 districts out in the Portland Road and merged them is not consistent with what's in the current comp plan. I'm not saying that, you know, I'm for or against them, just saying that if you take things from the comp plan and try to apply it and say it's not consistent, you know, I can equally find things that will say the opposite. So again, I think that if as suggested by Councilor Minthorn, you know, staff could get with Mike Eon, and we could kind of get this corrected before that second and final reading, I'd probably be more apt to support it. The challenge behind that is I've been hearing that for 8-9 months and it hasn't come to fruition. So I don't really fully understand what the problem is with that, but thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Johnston. Councilor McPhail.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To agree with Councilor Johnston's point, based on the last discussion when this was brought back to the planning board, that was the consensus. It's not that they are in disagreement with a master plan. It is identifying the proper places to put it. So again, with the potential of having a little more clarification would definitely help. They were looking to assign it back to long range planning, but unfortunately with timing on that, they were stuck as to where the master plan should be, where we have grouped the 6 previous zones together.
Thank you, Councilor McPhail. Any further discussion? Councilor Minthorn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Maybe it'd be appropriate to have Denise or Bob Hamlin comment on everything they've heard in the totality of our discussion.
Director Clavette, thank you for joining us this evening. Bob, I think you're on as well. Thank you for joining us. Is there anything at this time that you'd like council to be aware of?
Thank you, Mayor Doyle, and thank you, councilors, for asking me to provide some input. Keeping in mind that the rationale behind placing the entire Portland Road with the ability to have master plan development was so that we weren't cherry picking that potentially we will develop around the Cascade Road intersection, but not behind Galos Chevrolet, but maybe potentially by Aquabog, but maybe not by, and so basically it was giving equal and free reign for any landowner that has properties behind any of the properties or the businesses behind Route 1 a corridor, that they're able to sell their properties and have equal footing in the ability to develop that as a master plan development. And so our issues were that we are currently working with several developers that if this doesn't pass, no worries. They will come back for a contract zone and then that they will be discussed on that and on that merit. But again, essentially is that who are we to decide which, it was our belief, staff's belief, that who are we to decide which sections of Route 1 are better apt to be developed than others. And again, like I stated, we are working with several landowners that own properties behind the essential corridor on Route 1. And who are we as staff to determine that behind Galos was better than Cascade, better than Aquabog, and better than any of those properties. And Bob, if you wanted to add some more to that, essentially that was the reason why we were essentially wanting that. And again, conditional use, right? And so it would have to fly in the merits of being able to pass under conditional use and not necessarily permitted. And Bob, if you could add to that, that'd be great. And thanks again.
Yes, I was pleased to hear Councilors Minthorn, Johnston, and McPhail, those who have been most closely watching the planning board's operations over the past several months, agree that I think changes are within reach, and that if the council would be willing to entertain amendments to the language that's before the council this evening, by the time of either the public hearing or the second and final reading, I think that language can be ready.
Thank you, Bob. I just have a quick question. These have now gone back through the planning board and come back to the city council. If they're further amended, they have to go back to the planning board for review if it's something they haven't talked about. Is that my understanding?
I'm going to defer comment on that to the city attorney, but I will offer this. The planning board has discussed the Portland Road District and master plan development extensively, meeting after meeting. I'm not sure there's any particular way of looking at this that hasn't been discussed. I would propose to share that with City Attorney Murphy as soon as tomorrow morning and seek his input on that. Quite understandably, if this has to go around the barn and once again back to the planning board before being able to be considered for final action by the City Council, I think all parties involved would agree that that's not the most desirable route to have to take. But if this could be accomplished over the next few weeks and be stirred into the mix for a second and final, if the council is open to that, then staff is fully supportive.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Councilor Johnston.
Thank you. I just have a comment, and it's not intended to be, directed in any way at staff. I'm just, I understand the issues, as the comment was earlier, as far as picking, winners and losers, for lack of a better term, as far as where, this used to be permitted, but that is what zoning is. That is what the comp plan is. And so I understand the staff doesn't want to do it. And really, realistically, they shouldn't be the ones making those decisions. But I think that's also why the planning board, and myself included, through the ZORS committee, was looking at this as, hey, let's put it to the comp plan and see what comes out of the comp plan process. Because clearly, those involved at the time felt it needed more vetting, particularly after having shifted course in the middle of the zoning ordinance. So again, I'm just like, that is the intent of zoning. It does, restrict and allow uses, land uses. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Johnston. Councilor Berman.
Yeah, thank you. Also, maybe more of a statement, but reading the planning board's report and having watched some of their meetings, I don't read that they're opposed to master plan developments, but only that they wanted more time to discuss, to determine where they're most appropriate and where the density is most appropriate. And I also think that in general, the role of council is to defer to those boards who've taken the years of time to study it and have expertise, and we should be overruling their suggestions only under the most extraordinary of circumstances. So if we can get some of that work done in the next couple of weeks and get suggestions to tighten this up, I would also be in favor of that. But as it is, I would tend to want to defer to the planning board on this one.
Thank you, Councilor Berman. Councilor McPhail.
Director Clevette, could you just clarify, in the recommendation you have as permitted use to the portion of the Portland Road District north of Cascade Road and north of Spring Hill. Just to clarify, is that basically identifying each side of the road from a point? So it would be the north side from Spring Hill up, but then the north side only starting at Cascade to the Scarborough line?
Bob, do you have the map right and ready so we can pull that up? I believe you are correct, but I would have to have the map right in front of me to look at that.
Okay.
There are a lot of considerations, and to Councilor Johnston's point and to Councilor Berman's point, clearly it is the planning board's opinion, and then the staff has another opinion. And so both of us are sets of professionals and volunteers that come in with opinions. And so I respect what the planning board and the ZOR committee has put together, but I also respect what the attorneys and what our city staff has presented as well for options. And so this is clearly a policy decision and a priority decision made by the council, whether it goes back to the comprehensive plan or not. I will not fall or die on this. And clearly we're presenting our opinions and whatever the will of the council. Might I suggest that whichever way it goes, that you open you schedule the public hearing, you open it, just don't close the public hearing, right? So we advertise and you just keep it open until we have the opportunity to vet this out and come up with other amendments. And so you have everything consistently open, but you don't necessarily have to close it. And so, but if you table it, that's fine too, and we will come back with amendments. But I think giving the public an option to come out and give you further opinions and give time for Bob and staff and also for attorneys to come back with further amendments, not amendments, corrections or revisions rather than amendments, I think is a better idea. Because I think you can amend till the cows come home. You can keep amendments going. So I just want to suggest that maybe that might be an option for you folks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Johnston and Councilor Minthorn. Councilor Johnston.
I didn't realize my hand was still up, but I guess I would just add that, again, you know, when I looked at the comp plan, I looked for what's specifically stated in there. And throughout that document, the 2011 document, it's pretty clear. And I know myself as a counselor, I've had the opinion or feeling as long as I've been on council and really prior to that, that the majority of that land out in, you know, the Portland Road area should really be reserved for commercial. Obviously, I'm not opposed to some residential. It needs to be clearly, you know, decided where it's going to be as it's standing. You know, as I said, the way it's presented, you know, this master plan developments we could end up with a lot of housing, which again, I don't think any of those involved or those even not involved today, I think they'd be shocked at what could potentially be out there if we don't change something. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Johnston. Councilor Minthorn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One of the things you might ask Tim Murphy tomorrow, is there language that may be sitting out there in another municipality that would basically limit the number of master planned opportunities that the city would raise or allow in a given 12-month period because of the extra complexity of these things, the extra burden it places on staff and the planning board, and the complexity of the development and that type of thing, maybe only allowing 2 master plan developments a year take place. Because what we're really trying to do, as I understand it, is we have some developers that would like to participate and come to the city and invest in the city. And at the same time, I remember Mike Eon was very distinct, and Mike's available tonight as well in the background. I remember his concerns that if this comes out as is, there's the potential for, you know, 20 developers to come to the table, so to speak, in the next 2 years. I see Bob rolling his eyes already at that number, but, you know, I think that was the big concern, is that we might get too much in the queue too quickly by just carte blanche passing this. And that was some of the limitations on the geography in the discussion. But I'm wondering if we don't have the ability as a council to limit the city to 2 master plan developments per year in this area under this zone, so that we can kind of control that growth in that manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Minthorn. Any other discussion on the first reading of, on accepting the planning board report? A roll call vote to accept the planning board report. Councilor Archer.
Yes, to accept the planning board report.
Councilor Purdy.
Yes.
Councilor Gunn.
Yes.
Councilor Berman.
Yes.
Councilor Minthorn.
Yes.
Councilor McPhail.
Yes.
Councilor Johnston.
Yes.
Thank you. Councilor McPhail.
I move to hold the first reading and to set the public hearing for March 8th, 2021 to add master plan development as a permitted use in the Portland Road District.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilor McPhail, second by Councilor Minthorn. Discussion on holding the first reading and set the public hearing for March 8th to add master plan development as a permitted use in the Portland Road District. Councilor Archer.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will vote to move this forward, but I believe there's a lot of moving parts that I don't like at this moment, but I'm not going to hold that up in this process. Doing things after the fact is not usually in the best interest.
Thank you, Councilor Archer. Councilor Johnston.
Thank you. Goodness. I mean, I think personally, I'd prefer to see whatever, amendments from staff and whatnot come forward before actually scheduling that public hearing. We might not have it prior to the public hearing, and then we'd have a situation where we're holding a public hearing without all the information, but that's me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Johnston. Any other discussion? Seeing no hands raised, no councilors seeking recognition, roll call. Councilor Archer.
Aye.
Councilor Purdy.
Yes.
Councilor Gunn.
Yes.
Councilor Berman.
Yes.
Councilor Minthorn.
Yes.
Councilor McPhail.
Yes.
Councilor Johnston.
No.
That was a no, Councilor Johnston. Thank you.
Yes and no.
That brings us to item J, which was tabled from February 8th, 2021. It's a first reading, vote to accept the planning board report and set public hearing for March 8th, 2021 for zoning map amendment for the parcels on Flag Pond Road, previously zoned low density residential to be rezoned industrial. Is there a motion on table?
So moved.
Councilor Gunn. Is there a second on table?
Second.
Councilor Purdy. Roll call vote on table. Or excuse me, any discussion on a table? Roll call vote. Councilor Archer.
Aye.
Councilor Purdy.
Yes.
Councilor Gunn.
Yes.
Councilor Berman.
Yes.
Councilor Minthorn.
Yes.
Councilor McPhail.
Yes.
Councilor Johnston.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 to untable. Councilor Johnston, you were the item commentary on this. Would you like to read that, or would you like to defer to somebody that hasn't previously made comments?
I will defer to Councilor McPhail, I suppose.
Is there a Councilor McPhail is accepted? Councilor McPhail. Councilor McPhail, you're muted.
Thank you. Sorry. Landowners Rand and Susan Clark have requested a zoning map amendment for portions of 2 parcels on Flag Pond Road. Roughly 1.5 acres of the parcel are zoned R-1A currently, which would become low density residential upon adoption of the new zoning map, and are requested to be rezoned to industrial. This amendment was brought forth as part of the zoning ordinance review process at the January 11th, 2021 council meeting. Upon further consultation with legal counsel, it was advised that the city council refer the amendment back to the planning board for review, public hearing, and report to the city council based upon section 230-1401B of the Saco zoning ordinance. The planning board held the public hearing on this amendment on February 2nd, 2021. At the meeting, the board voted 5-1 to forward a negative recommendation for the proposed rezoning. Staff recommends that the City Council hold first reading and set the public hearing for March 8th, 2021 for the zoning map amendment for the parcels on Flag Pond Road, previously zoned low-density residential to be rezoned to industrial. I move to accept the Planning Board report as submitted.
Second.
Been a motion by Councilor McPhail, second by Councilor Minthorn to accept the planning board report. Any discussion on accepting the planning board report? Councilor Johnston?
Well, I don't know if it's directly into whether or not we should be accepting the report. I mean, I agree with the report. I think that a little history is kind of in order here. As I recall it, this first came to what was at the time the ZORs and Planning Board kind of joint committee, probably the end of summer, early fall. I might be off, you know, but somewhere in that period of time. And I mean, that was the first we had heard of it. It really wasn't addressed during the ZORs process. So it was kind of late in the game, I guess is my point. And so when it first was brought up, you know, I looked at it and certainly, you know, viewed it as a difficult situation. You know, I understand the plight of the lot owner and obviously I'm not adverse or opposed to more industrial development. You know, the challenge that I saw with it obviously is entering off the Flag Pond Road and what that impact is to that neighborhood. And so again, you refer to the comp plan, and in the comp plan, you have several stated goals that are specific. And, you know, primarily to summarize, I'd say that it's pretty clear throughout the comp plan that there's statements made as far as not infringing in industrial or commercial uses into long-established residential neighborhoods. Clearly, this is a long-established residential neighborhood. And so that was the challenge I saw with it. And that's really why at that point, as I recall it, it was myself that kind of had suggested this be, again, brought up during the comp plan process, because I looked at it and said, well, maybe we should take a better look at the entire area to determine what's, you know, future uses for this area. I mean, obviously right now, it's a residential neighborhood along the Flag Pond Road, but that's why you do long range planning. So maybe in the future it shouldn't be. And again, it's not my opinion. I'm just stating how I viewed it, you know? And so as going all the way back to 2011 comp plan, this neighborhood along the Flag Pond Road was low density residential. And again, I fully understand, you know, that this particular lot owner needs access to his land, but at the same time, this parcel has been landlocked for decades. As far back as I can recall, when this was initially made industrial land, it was understood that there really wasn't access. And the way I understand it, having spoken to people involved at the time, was that the intent was to always get access off Wiley Road. So that was the path forward, and obviously that hasn't happened. But there's also statements in the comp plan that are specific to the city taking a larger look at this area and figuring out how to create that access. And like I said, it hasn't happened, but I still believe that instead of cherry picking this and saying, well, we're going to gain access through here, we should really be doing a more comprehensive review of that all those lots, because there's several that are landlocked, and figure out how to get that access versus, you know, again, and maybe the ultimate outcome is off the Flag Pond Road. But I personally felt, and I think members of the planning board, the zoning ordinance revision felt, that it really wasn't our role to make that determination, that it really needed a more comprehensive look at it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Johnson. Any further discussion before accepting the planning? Councilor Minthorn.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, attended the same meeting and heard some of the discussions. There was a long pontification about the absence of utilities out here and where they were coming from, the overarching financial burden coming up from Wiley Road would be into this parcel. Earlier in my younger life, I sold test equipment to the phone companies and covered the 17 states in the Southeast. And in all the driving that I would do, about 50,000 miles a year, going to see all the phone companies, there were a number of areas throughout the Southeast where you would have an area like this that would be very proximate to an interstate, and there would be a four-way stop or a flashing yellow or something like that that would, one of the big discussions had to do with traffic coming over I-95 and the speeds that are being seen through the area. And as I understand, this landowner's desire would be to make it a four-way intersection with the access road that goes to the hiking trails across the street on the north side of Flag Pond Road. And certainly the traffic technology with respect to signaling equipment is easily available and easily installed that could put a flashing light on the west side of the interstate. You could even entertain possibly with the traffic count that may warrant a four-way stop if this intersection was actually there, which would address many of the residential owners' concerns having to do with speed of vehicles coming over the overpass on their way to the traffic light at US 1. So I don't see these as insurmountables. I think it would behoove the city, especially with recent developments diagonally across at the Chamberlain properties or the Hancock lumber construction and some of the other that's gone on in the area, that providing this landowner access to possibly develop some light industrial in there would be a very good thing for the city and encourage some businesses that might utilize Hancock or other resources in the area to locate their businesses in that area. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Minthorn. Any further discussion on accepting the planning board report? Seeing no hands raised and no councilor seeking recognition. A roll call vote. Councilor Archer.
Aye.
Councilor Purdy.
Yes.
Councilor Gunn.
Yes.
Councilor Berman.
Yes.
Councilor Minthorn.
Yes.
Councilor McPhail.
Yes.
Councilor Johnston.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 to accept planning board report. Councilor McPhail.
I move to hold the first reading and to set the public hearing for March 8th, 2021 for the zoning amendment for the parcels on Flag Pond Road, previously zoned low-density residential, to be rezoned as industrial.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilor McPhail, second by Councilor Minthorn. Discussion on holding the first reading and setting the public hearing for March 8th for the zoning amendment for the parcels of Flag Pond Road, previously zoned low density residential, to be rezoned industrial. Seeing no hands raised and no councilors seeking recognition, a roll call vote. Councilor Archer.
Aye.
Councilor Purdy.
Yes.
Councilor Gunn.
Yes.
Councilor Berman.
Yes.
Councilor Minthorn.
Yes.
Councilor McPhail.
Yes.
Councilor Johnston.
No.
Motion passes 6-1. That brings us to item K, which was tabled from February 8th, 2021. It's a first reading vote to accept the planning board reports, the public hearing for March 8th, 2021 for the zoning amendment for the parcels on Lincoln and Bradley Street, previously zoned medium density residential, to be rezoned to Route 5 mixed use and zoning ordinance text to be amended. Is there a motion to untable?
So moved.
Councilor Minthorn. Is there a second to untable?
I'll second.
Second, Councilor Berman. Roll call vote on untabling. Councilor Archer.
Aye.
Councilor Purdy.
Yes.
Councilor Gunn.
Yes.
Councilor Berman.
Yes.
Councilor Minthorn.
Yes.
Councilor McPhail.
Yes.
Councilor Johnston.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 to untable. Councilor Johnston, this is your motion. I'm again imagining you would like to defer.
Yes.
Is there a council that wants to make this motion?
Mr. Mayor, I'll take it.
Councilor Minthorn.
The amendment for the parcels on Lincoln and Bradley Street previously zoned medium density residential are proposed to be rezoned to Route 5 mixed use, and the zoning ordinance text to be amended by replacing medium density residential with Route 5 mixed use. This amendment was brought forth as a part of the zoning ordinance approval process at the January 11th, 2021 council meeting for consideration and approval. Upon further consultation with legal counsel, it was advised that the city council refer the amendments back to the planning board for review, public hearing, and report to the city council upon section 230-1401B of the Saco Code of Ordinances. The planning board held a public hearing on the amendment on February 2nd, continued it to February 9th, 2021. The board then voted 7-0 to retain the medium density residential zone for the parcels in question and to incorporate findings of fact drafted by abutter Phil Hatch in support of this recommendation. Staff recommends that the city council hold the first reading, vote to accept the planning board report, and set a public hearing for March 8th, 2021 for a zoning map amendment for parcels on Lincoln and Bradley Streets previously zoned medium density residential to be rezoned Route 5 mixed use, and the zoning ordinance text to be amended by replacing the medium density residential with the Route 5 mixed use. I move to accept the planning board report as submitted.
Councilor Minthorn has made a motion to accept the planning board report. Is there a second? Second by Councilor McPhail. Discussion on accepting the planning board report. Seeing no hands raised, no councilor seeking recognition. On the roll call vote on accepting the planning board report, Councilor Archer.
Councilor Johnston has his hand up.
Councilor Johnston.
Thank you. I think the motion makes it hard to discuss the topic, but if that's all right, that's really what my intent here is. Again, when I look at this and I think over the last 2+ years, you know, I start with the ZORs or Zoning Ordinance Revision Committee and what we were tasked with, which was revising the zoning ordinance. There was no clear guidance as to what specifically was being sought. So, I mean, I took from that, you know, the task was, hey, we're going to look at zoning throughout the city and do as we saw fit. In this particular case, right from the very beginning, our consultants recognized that the MU4, the current zoning, was not consistent with the surrounding neighborhood. And during that process, they rezoned it to MDR. I remember having the conversations. They weren't nearly as long as the conversations we've had since then, but I do recall them. And I felt when it was just the ZOR's process that we all kind of were in that feeling that the MU4 was out of place and it really never should have been in its current existence. It remained that way as MDR for the majority of the process. You know, and so I would say, or I would not say, as it was alluded to earlier tonight by one of the speakers in the public, that this was a targeted change. This change occurred long before any potential project that I know of had any interest in this particular, in this case, it ends up being a particular lot. So I think, you know, when it was felt by staff and potentially, I guess, legal counsel that making the MDR would be not consistent with the comp plan, the ZORs and planning board, again, we discussed this topic at length over many Zoom meetings. You know, and again, the conclusion at the end of it was that the R5 MU, which, as you've heard before, never really existed during our process. It was something created that was, I guess, a solution to address what was a perceived consistency issue with the comp plan. But we all felt that it was not the right fit for the neighborhood, and we made the recommendations that this land be more harmonious with the surrounding neighborhood. So I think that's something that's really hasn't been addressed at council level, and I spoke to this during the ZORS process well over a year ago. We really need to go back and address why the MU4 was created, and that's something that hasn't been really addressed. If you go back to that period of time, and the vast majority of the faces I'm seeing weren't even involved in the city politics at the time, but you know, I recall it. I certainly wasn't on council. I was gearing up for my first run on council, and I was following along with that process. And the creation of the MU4, as I understood it, was created for the Kimball Trust to make better use of land that they currently own through uses that aligned with their goals, primarily healthcare, community service oriented. For those that recall, back in 2009, the Volunteers of America organization that's a part of the Kimball Health Building facility now, they proposed a veterans homeless housing facility, and it needed a contract zone in order for it to operate out of there. So in order to, again, like I said, I wasn't physically there, but I've spoken to many that were involved in this creation of the MU4. The intent was to create a zoning district that would allow further development of those types of uses and densities without needing that contract zone. You know, prior to this, the zoning was R1D, which is what the MDR is becoming today. This type of development never came to fruition, and the current zoning for the MU4, when you actually look at what's in the comp plan, is not consistent with what's described under the future land use plan in the 2011 comp plan. Our zoning currently allows high density residential without the mixed use component, which was not the vision of the comp plan. And I can assure you that's not really what the intent of anybody involved was at the time. So again, I think we can go around and round on consistency, but you know, ultimately, as the elected officials, and in my opinion, you know, most importantly, the constituents we represent, do we believe is changing this zone to R5MU, which my biggest issue with, and again, I've heard through many public hearings, you know, comments about a certain development. I've never even uttered the words because I've always looked at this zone change specifically through the zoning. And so the concern I have here with the R5 or going to the R5 is that because of the master plan development standards, we actually have potential to allow higher densities than what's currently in place with the MU4, which I think would be the wrong direction for Saco. So again, not talking about a project that's totally separate. That project has an application before the planning board, and as far as I understand it, you know, their grandfather. But I think if something happens or they withdraw or something, whatever, you know, it's out of my hands. I don't think that going to the R5 MU is the best for that neighborhood and really ultimately Saco. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Johnston. Any further discussion on accepting the planning board report? Okay, roll call vote on accepting the planning board report. Councilor Archer.
I do accept the report.
Thank you. Councilor Purdy.
Yes.
Councilor Gunn.
Yes.
Councilor Berman.
Yes.
Councilor Minthorn.
Yes.
Councilor McPhail.
Yes.
Councilor Johnston.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 to accept the planning board report. Councilor Minthorn.
Thank you. I move to approve the first reading and to set the public hearing for March 8th, 2021 for parcels on Lincoln and Bradley Street previously zoned medium density residential to be rezoned to Route 5 mixed use and the zoning ordinance text and map to be amended accordingly.
Motion's been made by Councilor Minthorn. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second, Councilor Berman. Discussion on the Councilor Minthorn.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The residents of Ward 5 made it perfectly clear their expectation for my vote tonight on the R5MU zone. As with many of my votes during my tenure on council, the expectation to follow process factors into each decision. I trust my fellow councilors have applied the same time and consideration for their vote as I have my own. The zoning of this parcel directly impacts my constituents in Ward 5 in numerous ways and will do so long after most of our lifetimes. I will be voting no, and I encourage my fellow councilors to respect the wishes of Ward 5 residents who will be negatively impacted by this decision if it goes through. We have an opportunity as a council with this vote to send a clear message tonight about the kind of community we want to see for our city's future. The size of this development at this location is not it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Minthorn. Councilor Archer, then Councilor Berman. Councilor Archer.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I speak in opposition to the proposed change to create high-density development in a neighborhood that I believe to be best fit for medium-density development. I'm not against overall development. However, development must be in the best interest of the majority, logically and rationally approached and completed in thoroughness. Since the first introduction to council on this proposal, I have had concerns related to the infrastructural needs of creating the allowance of high-density development in a neighborhood that is currently experiencing an aging sewer and watering system, a near-capacity wastewater treatment plant, recent pipes bursting on 112 near the area, a known traffic congested problem, a near-capacity school system, and other challenges related to pre-development capacities and future resource allocation of millions of dollars. More importantly than the merits that I present is the manner in which a proposal is developed. Based on a preliminary review of the timeline related to this project, I want to make it clear, I'm only speaking on behalf of myself. I have ascertained that throughout the 2-year timeframe, the city has chosen to circumvent the will of the people in this amendment. This is evident, in fact, with the Zords Committee not presenting a high-density recommendation, the planning board not forwarding a recommendation to the council twice, several reports from citizens stating they were not provided answers from the city, a rush to push forward this proposal to council to vote on a first reading prior to receiving a planning board report and its accompanying information, leading to this council requesting tabling the first reading to not having all the relevant information. I'm also concerned of a pattern that may be developing. Over the last few years, I've heard similar complaints related to the developments of the Ecology School, Toddle Inn, the Industrial Park, 2 Bayview projects, and from some of the local businesses who have had negative experiences with the city. Complaints with boards and commissions saying they only get some of the information or get much needed information at the last minute. It has also been reported that legal opinions presented may be cherry-picked and are often not given all contextual information from the lawyers for the board to make a decision. Most recently, I was informed of an email written from the city to a citizen to not contact the city anymore related to the development, and an email identified in a planning board packet that the city will run interference on and fight the neighborhood. These actions and other problems are leading to several millions of dollars in potential legal liabilities against the city, including the potential risk to the city related to this project, and potential risk of legal liability against the Campbell Trust, who operates the trust on behalf of the city. I want to be crystal clear to the public, our shareholders, to the members of the ZORS committee, I hear you. To the members of the planning board, I hear you. To the members who reached out to the city related to the ecology school, the industrial park, Bayview, and other projects, I hear you. To the abutters of the proposed zoning change, I hear you. To my constituents, specifically those who outreached me who live on Boom Road and Route 5, I hear you. And for all the other citizen shareholders of this city who spoke out today, I hear you. And to those who support this project, including the Flattening Company, I also hear you, and I am empathic to your frustration with the city of Saco. There is a pattern developing that is not in harmony with the values of those who consider Saco home. The city must do better. Citizens' voices and their wishes are to be heard. A citizen's voice is not just a step within the rules and processes of this city. Their voices must be heard, their questions answered. While I may not always agree with the views or wishes of the public, I do make an honest and good faith effort to hear the other side. This city is at a precipice with development, and it is my optimistic belief that when a person transitions into the contemplation of the precipice, that person becomes willing to self-reflect, analyze the problem, and step up to become better. To some, this speech may be a lot to take in, and I may experience some political backlash for speaking the truth. However, my time in the Marine Corps instilled in me the concept of courage. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the recognition of fear in doing the right thing anyway. With that said, I present to you a statement by President Roosevelt who suggests that complaining about a problem without posing a solution is called whining. I offer the following recommendations to get us back to the city that I believe we want to be. First, I believe that we, the city, must objectively reflect on the Kimball Health rezoning process, beginning from its concept to the final vote and report back. To grow, we must learn from our mistakes, give kudos to our strengths, and reflect on how to improve the process. Second, I believe we, the council, need to assess and have an honest discussion with: are the issues identified by citizens systemic or staffing related? Is the council asking too much from our staff? And do we need to reassess our staffing numbers? Are we willing to increase our developmental department budgets to better serve our economic development needs? Third, over the past few years, the city has been utilizing a planning and economic development model. I believe that the focus of planning and economic development are two distinct methods of governing growth. My understanding of economic development is defined as a department that seeks to provide assistance to businesses that encourage investment in the community, whereas our planning department's mission is to serve as a guardian for the future of the city. I believe that the city needs to reassess this model and look at: 1, does our current model meet the needs of the city? 2, should we go back to the model in which planning and economic development are separated in our organization, and these two departments merged together are not working out well for the city at this time? Lastly, I'm very concerned with all that's happened in the totality of the zoning proposal, specifically with a new master plan development project that the city as a whole had limited experience with. I believe that the city as a whole needs additional training in how to conduct projects of this size. I believe at this time, a 6-month moratorium on master plan development and related projects should be passed to allow for the council, city staff, our boards and commissions, and our citizens time to be trained, retrained, or become informed of what a city within a city means and what are the benefits and disadvantages are. We cannot fix the past. We cannot fix the past, but we do have the power to change the future. We need to relook at ourselves, our processes, improve on our strengths, correct our deficiencies. We may be friendly by nature, but in us is a part of our former US Senator and State of Maine Governor, citizen of Saco, John Fairfield, in all of us that is willing to stand up to do what's right. To those who live, work, and play in Saco, you have been heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Archer. Councilor Berman.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. That was powerful, Councilor Archer, and I agree with most of your suggestions. I would also like to offer a slightly different perspective. I know I've only been on council a short time. I've been paying attention for quite a bit longer. On this issue, I've listened to the neighbors. I've been out to the property and walked it twice with different groups of neighbors. I've been on many phone calls. I understand the issues. My understanding is that the opposition here is mostly about one particular project. I understand that opposition. I understand why that opposition exists. If it were happening in my backyard, I would probably share that concern. But this issue before us tonight isn't about a particular development, which may or may not be far enough along that the decisions we're making tonight is moot. My understanding is the decision we're making tonight is about what zone is best for that property, for that neighborhood, and for the city as a whole. And so I'd like to talk a little bit about what that looks like to me. And to me, in Saco, demand for housing is out of control. And that's driving up property values and taxes and driving up rents, putting severe limitations on affordable housing. The city also has considerable needs. We learned a couple of meetings ago that the middle school needs a new roof. Young school needs to be replaced, which will have cost. On a tour of the water treatment plant, I've learned we're one hurricane away from having that washed out. I understand that our police and fire and other first responders are vastly underpaid. Every time it snows, I receive phone calls and complaints about our sidewalk plowing and the need for more of it. Trails, parks, city services by Parks and Rec are in hot demand, including our teen center. All of that is going to come from either increased taxes or from additional development, which I think we need to be in favor of. We need to get the demand for housing under control. And we need to do it in a way that doesn't put additional demands on our current infrastructure, including traffic. Right? And that's done through commercial development and mixed use development. Right? We also have to do it in places that currently have sewer, water, and roads, or else the development doesn't help us with those things. And it's a bonus if it's in a TIF district. All of those things are what makes this property unique. Now, I've heard from neighbors about some of their concerns on this particular property. I've heard from concerns about preserving the ecology of that area, about limiting the construction, about limiting traffic flow, about our schools being at or over capacity. All of those issues, right, are magnified with residential development over a mixed-use development. Now, I'm not thinking about any particular development that's proposed. There may be better ones and worse ones. But a medium density residential zone, right, if fully developed, would make all of those problems worse. I also understand there's a strategy that by zoning it in a medium density residential zone, it's unlikely that further development will occur. I think that's a risky strategy. We don't know that development won't occur if we rezone it that way. And undoubtedly, a full medium density residential development is worse for that neighborhood and the goals that I've heard them express. I'll be voting to move this on to a public hearing so we can hear more about that. But it's not because I haven't heard the neighbors, it's because I have, and I've listened carefully. And we want to preserve those neighborhoods, what's nice about them, and the goals that they're trying to achieve. I think the right mixed use would be the appropriate use for that land. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Berman. Any other discussion? Seeing no hands raised and no councilor seeking recognition, a roll call vote. Councilor Archer.
No.
Councilor Purdy.
No.
Councilor Gunn.
Yes.
Councilor Berman.
Yes.
Councilor Minthorn.
No.
Councilor McPhail.
No.
And Councilor Johnston.
No.
Motion fails 2-5. So that moves us on to next item on the agenda, which is item 10, and that is new business. We have 3 or 4 things on the agenda, but it is 9:38 p.m. So at this time, If we would like to continue, we have to take a vote to continue, or we can push some of this off to the 3-1 meeting and call it an evening. Councilor Archer.
Yes, this question is to you, Mayor. Are any of these items time sensitive? Would you consider any of them time sensitive? I guess is the best way to ask.
No. Councilor Johnston.
I was basically going to ask the same thing. I don't know what the agenda looks like for next week, but if it's not overly packed, then I would just as soon push this off. Thank you.
Thank you. If there's no objection, we'll move new business items to a following agenda down the road. With that brings us to item 11 of tonight's meeting, and that is administrative update. City Administrator Canra.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One last call to participate in the city's beach parking survey for the Traffic Safety Committee. That will help the Traffic Safety Committee as well as council come up with new ideas and regulations regarding beach parking in the city. Please visit our website to fill out that survey. Our next senior meals program will be taking place on March 4th at the community center. It will be a lunch provided by the Bradley Street Deli and Catering. The event is sponsored by Saco Valley Shopping Center and the Biddeford Saco Rotary Club. Please contact our Parks and Recs department for further information or to sign up. A final reminder also on the 23rd annual Mary's Walk and Carryman Pub 5K, which will be held virtually on March 21st, 2021. The city's wellness program will be sponsoring the first 20 city employees who choose to participate. And of course, we're encouraging everyone to sign up and participate in once again this year's virtual event. The joint Biddeford Saco working group made up of councilors from both sides as well as the two managers and the mayors are scheduled to meet this Thursday, February 25th. Agenda items will include the harbor master position, a dispatch communication center, and potentially some other smaller items. Just an update on the budget. Director Salas and I are at work currently putting together the fiscal year 22 budget. We'll be meeting with department heads the week of March 8th, seeking their input and their submittals, and we will have our budget presentation to the council of the city administrator's proposed budget for FY22 on March 22nd coming up. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Any questions for City Administrator Cainrath? Seeing no questions, moving on there to council discussion and comment. Any council discussion and comment? Councilor Minthorn.
Thank you, Mayor. It's become clear no matter what I say or do, this recall group will continue to spread mischaracterizations about me and my position, inhibiting my ability to represent Ward 5. I do not want to put my family, and especially this city, through the negative headlines caused by a recall effort, which should be used only in the most egregious situations. Therefore, with over a year left in my final term, I resign effective immediately. I deeply appreciate the residents of Ward 5 for entrusting me as their counselor for the past 5 years, including these last months serving as deputy mayor. It's been the honor of a lifetime to serve the community and see the numerous contributions reflecting my service. I look forward to serving my community in other ways in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Minthorn. Any further council discussion and comment? Councilor Gunn.
I think I'm going to speak on behalf of most, if not all, of my colleagues and thank Councilor and Deputy Mayor Minthorn for his years of service. And as a new councilor, he was been more than helpful. and helping me learn the ropes of this job, because there's really no learner's manual to, having an interest in civics and an interest in politics and getting yourself elected. Next thing you know, you're behind the desk making the decisions. So, Al, I sincerely thank you for everything you've done for me personally and for the city as a whole.
Thank you, Joe. I really appreciate that.
Any other council discussion and comment? Councilor Berman.
No, just to echo what Joe said. Thank you, Alan, for all your service and your support in my short time on council. Appreciate it.
You're more than welcome, Mike.
Any other discussion on this, Councilor Archer?
Al, you finally got me speechless. I honestly don't know what to respond, but I feel like not responding is worse than stumbling at your words. I will say that I've known you for more than my time on council. I've known you a couple of years prior, but I always do believe you did have the best interest of the city at heart. I still believe that today. And again, I'm speechless at the moment, but thanks for being there. You mentored me as well, and just thought it was important for the public to know that. Take care, buddy.
Thank you, Marshall.
Any other council discussion and comment? Okay. With that, there's no executive session tonight, so there's no report from executive session. That brings us to item 15 on the agenda, which is adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make my last motion.
Councilor Minthorn. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Johnston. Roll call vote on adjourning. Councilor Archer.
Aye.
Councilor Purdy.
Yes.
Councilor Gunn.
Yes.
Councilor Berman.
Yes.
Councilor Minthorn.
Pass.
Councilor McPhail.
Yes.
Councilor Johnston.
Yes.
Yes.
Councilor Minthorn.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 to adjourn the meeting at 9:46 p.m. Thank you to everyone for your hard work tonight, your good discussion, especially around some very tough topics, as nobody really likes and enjoys change. We all have to we had the luxury of coming in at the same time, and it's going to be sad to see you go. So I'll just say thank you.
Mr. Mayor, you're more than welcome. It's been a fun 5 years. I've been sitting here reflecting a lot today and all weekend, actually, over the Stackpole Bridge, the ecology school, Ready Seafood, the dental offices, how we worked with U-Haul in sessions to get things changed there that were more amenable to the neighborhood around the U-Haul building, and countless other things that we've accomplished in the last 5 years. And you don't realize what a given year or 2 years means until you drive around after 5 of them, or I can't imagine Nate with his years, what he sees of all those little decisions we make day in, day out, week in, week out, and what the bigger impact is, on the community. And I'm not going anywhere. I do plan on returning to service, hopefully sooner than later. but there's just no way to be effective given the visceral nature of our city's politics right now. And I hope our city and our residents will consider the recent loss on the school board and my loss here, and maybe treat our elected officials in a much better way, considering we're all volunteering, and $100 a month doesn't cover the hours we all spend any month, including the summer ones. So you all take care, best of luck, and I'm happy to do anything I can if you ask. Take care.
On that note, be well and stay safe, everybody.